for bicycle and pedestrian advocacy training. Is there, no, not that one. It should work.
It's on this other computer. Is it on the wrong?
No, not. All right, great. So this workshop is brought to you by the Advocacy Advance partnership between the League of American Bicyclists and the Alliance for Biking and Walking. We have partnered for over 5 years now with the goal to increase public funding for biking and walking by working with our partners at the state and local level. And one of the ways that we do that is through a series of workshops called Navigating Map 21 workshops. There's one happening tomorrow. I hope many of you are planning to and able to be there for that. In that workshop, we're going to get very deep into the federal transportation bill and the opportunities to pay for walking and biking projects and programs through the whole spectrum of eligible programs within that bill. So when we go to communities, which this is, we've hit over 30 so far, when we go to communities, we work with advocates and agency staff at the regional and city and statewide level to talk about these opportunities, and when possible, we incorporate an advocacy training that gives us a space to talk directly with advocates. You know, it's very important to have collaboration, but also aware that with a mixed audience, there's some conversations you can't necessarily have. So this is really targeted to an advocacy audience about how to carry out an advocacy campaign to improve walking and biking. So today we will use a couple of examples from Idaho and then work together through a campaign in Texas to work through this framework of a winning campaign. As I mentioned, the partners of this program are the Alliance for Biking and Walking, the League of American Bicyclists. The Alliance for Biking and Walking is a coalition of over 200 state and local advocacy organizations with our goal to strengthen and unite these organizations. So we do that through coaching, mentorship program, mutual aid calls, winning campaign screenings, which is the 3-day version of what you're about to do in the next 3 hours. So you're not like in a truncated version of it, but we have longer ones that are spread out throughout 3 days and very hands-on into each of the elements. We also have a resource library for your organizational development, advocacy, and leadership development opportunities, and an upcoming leadership retreat in Pennsylvania this September. My colleague, Darren Fouché, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Bridget O'Keen. I'm the Deputy Director of the Alliance for Biking and Walking, and Darren Fouché is the Policy Director for the League of American Bicyclists. Do you want to run through that?
Sure. The League, some of you I know the League very well. Preston's in the room. We have a series of programs that are designed to help promote bicycling throughout the country. The Bicycle Friendly America program, which communities can apply for bicycle friendly community status. Universities can apply for bicycle friendly university status. We have a bicycle friendly business program as well, and the bicycle friendly states ranking. We have a women bike and equity program. They are facilitating the Future Bike Conference after Pro Walk Pro Bike on September 11th. Yeah. We have the League Certified Instructor Program. There's a brand new pocket guide that you can find online. Kristen has a copy of it right there. We do federal advocacy and host the National Bike Summit every year in March. We sponsor National Bike Month in May, and run the National Bike Challenge, where you can log your miles and compete with your friends there.
Okay. So together, the Advocacy Advance partnership does the Navigating Map 21 workshops that you'll see tomorrow if you're coming. We also have rapid response grants, which are short, quick turnover, smaller grants that we award to organizations that have the opportunity to increase public funding for walking and biking. These grants have an ROI that's leveraged over $1,700 for every $1 spent. That's $1,700 of public funding, so state, local, and federal dollars being spent on biking and walking projects. We also have some upcoming webinars, some interactive tools and reports on our website. And thank you to BikeTexas for being our local host here. We also in Brownsville, where we were the past couple of days in the Rio Grande Valley, and being a co-host for tomorrow's workshop. So for this afternoon, what we're going to do is, after we introduce everybody here and everyone who's joining us remotely, we're going to talk about a framework for a campaign. So what is an advocacy campaign, and what is a framework that you can use to approach planning your campaign to achieve ultimate success? We'll be doing that through a specific example in Idaho that has been a recent successful campaign. And then we're going to dig into a couple of the key elements of that campaign. Jack and Robin and the BikeTexas crew will give an update as to what's happening with federal funds in Texas, and we'll use that as a framework to go through how to build influence and political will and influence decision makers, how to communicate and message with those decision makers and your key audiences, and then some tactics to achieve success in your campaign. And then we'll adjourn at 4. So first we'll do a quick go around. If you could give your name, where you're from, and what your vision is for walking and biking in your community. So we'll start.
Me?
Yes.
I'm Patricia. I'm from Bike Austin, and I just felt like my vision would be more people biking and walking. Yeah, you can see our numbers.
Great.
Speak loud enough. Can they hear online?
No one's complained yet. I can't tell unless someone complains.
Okay.
But let us know, for those of you remotely, if you have trouble hearing the folks introduce themselves in the room.
Sue Anderson, Austin, Texas. I'm a representative, or I'm a member of Bike Austin. And really my vision for bicycling and pedestrian activity in Central Texas here is all ages, all abilities, easy, safe, convenient access in Austin to all types of transportation.
I'm Preston Terry. I'm on the board at Bike Austin. I want to make sure that cycling is legal everywhere, safe everywhere, convenient, and in most cases preferable to any other form of transportation.
My name is Tom Wall. I'm in Austin, Texas, and my vision for bicycling is that 20 to 30% of trips are made by bike in Central Austin by 2025, and walking is just, gosh, we have a complete sidewalk network by that time as well.
I'm Jack Stanford. I'm the policy manager here at BikeTexas. My vision includes a lot of what people have said, just safe access for everyone to be able to bike and walk who wants to, and including all those people who don't know they want to yet.
I'm Robin Stallings, Executive Director of BikeTexas, and my vision is a network of protected bikeways and trails within the towns and interconnected within Texas, and of course fighting to keep our rights to the entire transportation network, even as we try to make specific protected bike and pedestrian networks.
I'm Bill Abel with Bike Austin, and Robin said it very well.
Carol Reisner, Bike Austin, and my vision is that we have no cars other than taxis and maybe walkers and pedestrians in the inner city.
I'm Eric Benz. I'm the board president of Bike Austin. I've replaced 80% of my trips with a bike within the last 5 years. Last night, I actually showed my wife the Street Smarts Copenhagen thing, and I got inspired all over again. So that, between that vision for the city, and then so that I'm not at risk when I come from the northwest side of Austin and get in, so 8 ways in and out of the city, and then safe ways to get to communities all across Texas. That's what I think we need.
My name is Mark Berthew, Austin, Texas. My vision is to get more people and businesses commuting by bike, to just free up, there's more pathways, walkways, everything, just to get people exercising and just happy community.
Brenda Chuliwa, BikeTexas staff. I love Hill Penaloso's goal to have people 8 to 80 be comfortable cycling the streets, and interconnectivity to me is very important too. Interconnected routes. It enables people to do that.
My name's Emma Cravey. I'm with BikeTexas, and I would like to see a network of connected bikeways throughout the city so everyone will feel safe to ride a bike.
I'm Charles Miles. I get emails from BikeTexas. I guess being back from Austin, I just being able to get on my bike and not worry.
Mark Stein with BikeTexas, and of course, my vision is very much the same to what we asked and bicycling just being a very normal mainstream activity is my vision.
Durwood Mayfield, bike ambassador for BikeTexas, and it's mine mirrors Robin's, Hill's, Tom's, pretty much everybody in the room. Safe cycling for everybody. Stress-free cycling, where when you ride your bicycle, you don't get all stressed out about which yokel's going to buzz me next. So
And like Mayfield, I'm the ambassador also, and kind of the same scenario of everybody here. I'm for.
I'm still a passive communications for BikeTexas, and when you see me staring at the iPad, it's not because I'm uncomfortable, it's because I'm doing my job. And my vision, my parents are getting older, they're really unhealthy, and I like a network that can use to be healthy as they age and feel as confident in the streets as I do now.
So 2 things. One is we have some room at the front, so you can come and sit here and have a table. Front row is empty. We've got some empty seats at these others. So come on forward, even BikeTexas staff, welcome to come up to the tables. Also, we have a hashtag for today.
Because folks on the online couldn't hear the last introduction, so please do come up.
Yeah, it's going to really help a lot. Sue can be accepted if you want to sit somewhere else. But also, Sue, do we want to create a hashtag for today that we can share with people? No, for tweeting? No? Christy says no.
Okay, so now can we go to the people on the computer?
Yeah, I'm with everyone.
Also, we have 2 bathrooms. You'll see the signs over here, and there's not really an aisle. An aisle right behind that wall. You need access. We got plenty of coffee and snacks over there. Help yourself.
Okay, so I can hear myself, but
This one.
so I will go down the list on GoToWebinar and unmute you one at a time. So give your name and your vision for biking and walking. So Bill Shea.
Hello. I guess I'm unmuted now, huh?
Yep. So Bill, can you give us your vision for biking and walking?
Yeah, I guess so. I just like to see it an accepted form of transportation in Texas.
Bill?
Since it's accepted form of transportation.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. I will put you back on mute. Christina?
You can introduce yourself and also give your vision.
Be nice to know what people are too.
Christina, are you there? Going once.
Did that turn down too much? Let me try again.
I can clear it up.
Mic test, Christina.
All right.
Can you hear her?
I can hear you, Robin. I can't hear Christina. All right. Let's move on to the next person. Christy Arrington, you are now unmuted. So you might have to unmute yourself on your panel to go to webinar and introduce yourself.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm Christy Arrington, and I'm in Amarillo, Texas, and we started a group here recently called Riding Bicycles is Fun, and we're just mostly about we're encouraging a more bicycle-friendly community by being a more friendly bicycling community. And we're all about having fun. We're going to be in the Tri-State Fair Parade, and we've just started having some fun events up here. And in doing so, hopefully fostering a safer bicycling environment here. So anyway, first time to be on a webinar, and I'm freaking out. So put me back on mute.
Thanks, Christy. I'll put you back on mute now.
Thank you.
All right. Kenneth, you're now unmuted. Kenneth Brown, you've been sending us questions. I know you're there.
Ken Graham.
Once, twice. Next we have Kent.
Hello, this is Kent.
Great, we can hear you.
Hey, this is Kent Crowell in Midland, Texas.
Hi, Kent.
Hey, Robin. We're with the Permian Basin Bicycle Association. First time to do a webinar, and eager to see what this is all about.
Thank you. Melissa Lugo, you're now. Give us your name and where you're from and division.
Melissa, we're getting some feedback from you, so we're going to move on.
Robert, you're now unmuted. Robert Chaplin.
This is Bob Chaplin speaking. I'm LCI 2135, just interested in getting more people on the road, more people feeling safe so that they can take part in more of our events. So that's what we're looking for.
Great, thanks, Robert. What community are you from in Texas?
I'm from Grapevine, Texas.
Thank you so much. Scott White, you're
Hi, this is Scott. I'm from El Paso. I'm a member of El Paso Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. And our vision is trying to get more people out biking and walking, active transportation, improving the infrastructure, making the roads and the bikeways, whether they're on or off the road, safe, comfortable, accessible, and connected.
great, thanks, Scott. And Share the Road Panhandle.
Yes, this is Jennifer Waters. I'm with Share the Road Panhandle. I'm the treasurer for our organization. Can you hear me? Yes. Our organization seeks to educate the public about sharing the road amongst pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. And we hope to put out the message to the public about how to ride bikes on the same side of the road as cars and pedestrians to walk against. And also we seek public acceptance of other road users other than cars. That's a big hurdle for us up here.
Great, thanks. And finally, Terry Woods. Terry, you're now unmuted. Once. All right.
Would you like to circle back to Ken Graham or others that were missed in case they've got their technology worked out?
Well, maybe I just ask them to type in their message so we can speak for them.
Yeah, so if you did not get a chance to speak over the webinar, just type, send a question or send a chat, and I will make the announcement of your revision when I get them.
Great. Okay, there'll be opportunities later today where we want to make sure that people who are here remotely are able to contribute to the conversation. So this is a good test. This is a good test run, and when it works very clearly. So those of you remotely, don't be afraid to unmute yourself and speak out. Great. So there.
All right. So I felt like a great victory every time we got somebody on the line. Thank you for everyone for joining at home. It sounds like a pretty good. My Texas geography is not great, but it sounds like we have people spanning the state, so that's super. And thanks for you all. Mike Austin is in force here. So what we want to do today is we're going to go through, as Bridget said, one particular campaign and get us thinking about one example and go through all the steps. But the point of this is it's a way to think through how to exert influence on the public process. And so these are things that these questions and these ideas, this line of thinking can apply to any campaign that you may choose. So in thinking about a campaign, obviously figuring out what your campaign goal is going to be is really important. So the first question to ask is, what do you want to achieve? And in our introductions, we articulated a vision of a safe, connected, welcoming road environment where everyone can ride, and I think we had a pretty good consensus on that. The question is, how do you get there? And so when you're thinking about what campaign am I going to take on, that question of what's my goal going to be is really front and center. I've already said the word campaign several times, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what that is. So can anyone define a campaign for me, and in particular, tell me how it's different from a program? So what's a campaign?
I guess I would define a campaign in terms of a limited time frame. So we've got a point we're trying to achieve something, we're going to get it done, and then we're going to go on to the next thing where the program may extend over years.
That's great, Preston. Yeah. So a campaign, there's a set beginning and a set end, and you said we're going to try to achieve something. So by the end of a campaign, you know you either did it or you didn't do it. And not being successful is not the end of the world. Sometimes a lot of good things can come from a well-run campaign that may not be ultimately successful. But you know a campaign because it has a defined beginning, it has a process, and then it has an end. A program, as Preston said, could go on for indefinitely. So, you know, we have the bicycle-friendly community program that goes on until every country in every community is achieved bicycle friendliness. A campaign is, okay, we are going to run a campaign to make Austin platinum or diamond. That's a campaign. You know, it's not going to go on forever, one hopes. You've either succeeded or you haven't by the end of that campaign. So good. Anybody else want to throw anything out about what makes something a campaign? I think that was a pretty good start. Okay. All right. So why do we do campaigns? So what are some of the benefits of an organization undertaking a campaign and some of the challenges? Anybody want to throw out why we do a campaign?
It can help focus on the goal. I mean, it brings additional focus rather than it just if it's an ongoing goal within the program.
Yeah, we know we want safer streets, but we're going to get safer streets by really focusing our energy on this campaign that has a beginning, middle, and an end. Any other reasons why do we do a campaign in particular? Why not just a bunch of programs? Any benefits for our organization in doing that?
Energy.
Energy, yeah, you can get people engaged. So you say, we're going to win this funding, or we're going to build this bike lane, or we're going to start this education program. Help us, join us, contribute to us. Then you can fundraise around that campaign. It can be easier sometimes than just saying, we have this mission statement, help us achieve it. What are some of the challenges to a campaign?
Funding.
How do you pay for it? How do you pay for the staff time? Yeah. You got to do it.
It can take away capacity from other things that need to be continuing all the time with the organization.
Yeah, yeah. So limited. Everyone has limited resources. Figuring out, is this a campaign that's going to be worth it in the end? We'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that we recommend when taking on a campaign is looking to what else has been successful. We'll talk a little bit about that today. There are obviously tons of good ideas, and there are many good ideas in the world that have not yet been implemented. But we also know that there's been a lot of successful campaigns, and so building on success in the past that happened other places, learning from peers that have taken on successful campaigns, and putting some of that into practice is really important and recommended. Some of those, everything from infrastructure, getting that protected bikeway network, legislation, so knowing that several states have safe passing laws, and that's a growing trend, shows us that that's something we might want to consider because there's been success elsewhere. Complete Street's a perfect example of that. So there's legislation, complete legislation, then there's policy. Maybe we don't need a bill, we'll just get the Department of Transportation to implement that policy, knowing that there's tons of examples out there on the Complete Streets Coalition website and others, helps us know that it's winnable and that there's it's easier for us to convince folks to do it because there's other examples out there. And it might be a funding campaign. What have other states, what have other localities done to be successful in funding and trying to replicate some of that success? So choosing a campaign. So Tom mentioned there's staff capacity issues. There's cost to running a campaign. So is it worth it? How do you decide if a campaign is worth it? What do y'all think? Basically, weigh the cost of the campaign to what you might succeed if you do it. So, is it winnable? Are we going to spend all this resource and all our energy and all our political capital working on this campaign that we can pretty much figure out from the beginning is never going to happen, right? In some communities that might be, a $10,000 car tax. Is that a campaign we really want to take on? Are we ever going to win it? And then will it result in real long-term improvement? So is our safety campaign going to save lives? Is our infrastructure campaign going to create a built environment that's going to make it safer and easier and more comfortable for people to ride in the long term?
The second category of things to consider when you're taking on a campaign, because as someone mentioned, at all times you have many different things that you want to see happen, and with limited resources and limited capacity in organizations, really need to prioritize which one to go forward with. So the second category of what to choose, how to choose a campaign, is the engagement of your community. So the community can be your own membership, first of all. You should be thinking about your membership and engaging your members, but then also how you're going to bring in new members. So one is it a campaign that's going to unite your membership, or is it going to divide them? So what's an example of a divisive campaign? Yes.
Deciding whether you're going to promote being a vehicular cyclist only in your community, which means on the infrastructure teach everybody and the drivers to only be cars, or are you going to advocate for separate facilities? That can totally divide the community.
Yeah, that especially in your membership, if you have that history of membership. And I heard the H word as well. Yes, helmet is the classic divisive campaign. Like a mandatory helmet law is one example of something that it's not that it's not worth doing, or even regardless of the politics behind it, really it's a campaign that you need to anticipate there's going to be disagreement within your membership, and it can be a divisive campaign. Will it attract new members and engage them in a meaningful way? So how many people here have volunteered for an organization, maybe one of the groups represented here, but think about in your experience volunteering community organizations, where you feel like your membership and your volunteer time was really well spent. Raise your hand if you felt like you volunteered for something that your time was well spent. What are some examples of why?
Well, if the task suits somebody coming in and quickly engaging and being productive. or if the task is organized that way.
Great, great. Yes.
I think also it's communal. Like sometimes they say call all these people. It's harder to do it by yourself. It's better if you're in a big group with a bunch of people. Can you see them doing it?
Definitely. While phone banking or stuffing envelopes isn't the most exciting thing, if you're doing it with a group and there's food there, maybe there's beverages afterwards, it makes for a completely different type of environment. Any other examples of how you felt really engaged as a member? Oftentimes we think about our strapped capacity. One of the richest attributes of an organization is labor hours and the time that people put in, and really honoring that time and investing in that in the most meaningful way. That's really important to think about when you're undertaking a campaign. Many people care about it and are few or passionate, so you're going to get widespread support for your priorities, but then you also have a few people who put their stake in the ground. They said, this has to happen and I'm going to put my time and energy into it to see it through. So a combination of widespread, but also those peaks of people who are really passionate about the issue. Yeah, sure, I'll keep going. And then finally, we'll strengthen your organization. So I don't know if people on the phone can see this, but
we figured that out.
So usually when you're starting out, you're a brand new organization, you may not have very much money in the bank, you may not have an executive director, you're a small organization, and you undertake one campaign. So you take on something that's going to meet the context of your organization at the time. But through that, you're going to garner local support, you're going to get members involved, you're going to be able to fundraise. It's always easier to fundraise in the middle of a campaign than to ask for organizational support, ongoing support. So you're going to raise political will in the community. The media is going to talk more about your organization. You're going to have more of a brand. All those resources are going to make you a larger organization. And then when you have additional volunteers, when you have additional staff people, then you have the capacity to take on bigger campaigns. So it continually goes. Campaigns are essential to continual strength of the organization. So how are those ways that it will strengthen your organization? Will you be a thought leader in the community? Will you be able to build partnerships within your community and then build political power? So will councilwomen come to you to find out what your opinions are before they go to a vote? You know, how much political power are you building? Will leverage positive media? Sometimes you can get negative media, and that can be really powerful too if you have the capacity to communicate and respond. But ultimately, you want to have a positive media presence. And then does it have income potential? So is it something that your volunteers, your members are going to donate to? You're going to get large donors. You may have foundation grants or other sponsorships. So given all these, what are some ideas of what campaigns have people implemented in the past that you feel is a good fit for all of these categories? What was that? No, that's from Texas.
It's not a bike campaign, it's a litter campaign that's wildly successful.
Great.
Is it really a campaign or is that a program? It's been ongoing forever.
It became a program.
And that's a good distinction when Darren was mentioning campaigns versus programs. Program is something that's ongoing, but most likely it was launched by a campaign. So Safe Routes to School is a great example of something that's an ongoing program, but it was launched through an initial campaign to get Safe Routes to School implemented.
I think that also sort of brings up that everybody knows what that is because it's really simple. And so, I mean, I don't want to reduce things to like a slogan, but I think to appeal to a lot of people, it sort of needs to be catchy.
Definitely.
Yeah, you might repeat "Don't mess with Texas" because they might not hear a word out
Okay.
there.
So the example was "Don't mess with Texas" as an example of a successful campaign, and that messaging piece is really important. We're going to get into that a little bit today. Great. So once you choose a campaign, how do you develop it in a way that's going to achieve success? And the framework that we use and is very common among advocacy organizations is this. So it's in a pie chart. We will go through a process of 1 through 7, but it's also an iterative process that each step is really informed by future steps. So it starts with issue definition. So what is the issue? How do you communicate to the public that there is a problem and that you have a solution to that problem? Then second, what are your goals for the campaign? And also, just so you know, as long as you registered today, we'll send you this PowerPoint and a couple additional resources. So what are your campaign goals? What do you ultimately want to achieve? And breaking that apart in short, mid, and long-term goals. We recommend that campaigns are about typically no longer than 1.5 years. Once you get past that time, and it's really a very long-term campaign, you can break it apart in small pieces. So one example is setting up a whole network, a bicycle and pedestrian network. You may start with, first you get a plan, a bicycle and pedestrian plan written. That's one element of the campaign. Then you get the plan funded as a second element. Then you actually are getting those projects on the ground, and each one might be a different. A lane down, a protected facility down one lane might be one aspect of it, while a sidewalk network might be another. So you really want to try to break things down to manageable parts. Again, you want to win. So the more opportunities you have to win along the way, the more momentum you're going to build for your organization. And when you do think about goals, also think about what your organizational goals are. So again, they're combined. You want to think of them in tandem with each other. So as you're thinking about winning the campaign, you also want to think about what that means for adding additional staffing and resources to your organization. Then what's the context you're working with? Has anyone here heard of a SWOT analysis? So can someone who's heard of it say what SWOT stands for?
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Great. So what are your internal strengths and weaknesses? What is the context that you're working on, that challenges that you need to keep in mind, and opportunities for success? And then strategizing and power mapping. Who are the decision makers? Who are the people who can make the choices, decisions to affect the change you want to see, and how do you influence them? Then communications. How do you communicate your issue with different audiences? Then tactics and timelines. Many times as advocates, we're really enthusiastic to start doing stuff. Having the protests, writing the letters, showing up at the doorsteps of key decision makers. But really that comes at the end of the process. Once you actually know who the decision makers are, once you know how you're going to speak with them and what message they need to hear, then you think about the best way to allocate your resources. And then finally, resource management. So every campaign requires resources and also can acquire resources. So what are your funding opportunities and what's your budget? So we are going to go through a campaign example, and then after a break, we will all come together as a group and work through a Texas campaign example, really focusing on these goals areas. So we're going to do some power mapping, we're going to talk a little bit about messaging, and we're going to brainstorm advocacy tactics. So we'll use a campaign example of bicycle and pedestrian funding in Idaho, and for a little bit of background.
Okay. Do you want to handle that?
All
right, so we're going to go into a lot of detail tomorrow. For those of you who are coming to the Navigating Map 21 workshop, we will go through great detail about the federal funding process and what all the different programs are that are available for biking and walking, and talk about how to access them in the Austin region and in Texas. This is a little bit of a sneak preview for that because it provides the context for the campaign that Bridget is going to talk about. This is the current transportation bill. It's called Map 21, Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century. There are several programs within that, many of which can fund bicycling and walking improvements. The one that historically has been the most directed towards biking and walking is now called the Transportation Alternatives Program. You'll hear people say TAP, right? So throughout the day we'll say TAP. We're going to try and keep the acronyms to a minimum, but TAP is one to know. It's a program that really, a lot of bicycling and walking programs have been paid for, and projects have been paid for with TAP. So the way it flows is each state gets a portion of TAP funds. Some of it goes to recreational trails program that's set aside. The rest of it is dispersed across the state. It's done in two ways. The first is the state has half of the funds, half of its share. It's not. This is the national 364 million. That's not Texas's share. And the state can decide what to do with that, and they can spend it anywhere in the state. The other half of the funds get dispersed across the state depending on how many people live in that size community. So if a lot of people live in rural areas, then a lot of the money goes to communities under 5,000. If, depending on how many live in 5,000 to 200,000, that percent of the funds go to those size communities. And finally, large cities, metropolitan areas over 200,000 get their own pot of money based on the percent of the population that lives in large cities, metro areas, and they disperse that money themselves through a competitive process. Again, we'll hear a lot more about that tomorrow, but this is important to understand for this context. Every state has the power to decide they have to spend this amount, but they can decide whether or not they spend this amount or flex it to another program and use it in different ways. So that's the question that we have our eyes on today.
Is it even a transportation-related program or any program in the state?
Great clarification. Other transportation programs. But it means that you can take the bike ped money. We consider it bike ped money. You can also do environmental mitigation. You can take that money and you can spend it on highways. And so the idea is to get at most of those visions that we articulated in the beginning, we need to be spending the transportation alternatives money on biking and walking. So that's sort of the assumption that we're making here, and the challenge that Idaho had and Brittany's going to walk through. So this flexibility is new under the new transportation bill, and it's something that we're keeping our eye on.
And Darren, I have a question. What's the impact in the future if all the states flex away this money? Will we continue to get it in the future? So there's a bigger risk in the long run, isn't there, if we don't do these things?
That's a leading question, and that's great. Yeah, obviously, at the national level, we're really concerned if states start taking advantage of this flexibility, and then they flex it and they spend it on something other than roads. They can also flex it and spend it on bike ped, because tomorrow we'll talk about all the different programs that you can still build bike ped with. But if they're building something other than bicycling, walking, and transportation program activities, it sends a back signal to Washington saying states don't want this money, so we're certainly not going to require them to spend it on those things. What we're seeing is, for the most part, states are embracing the program, implementing the program, and setting it up. But that's what we need to see happen to send that message back to Congress to say not only are they taking advantage of the money available, but we need more.
And just to be clear, this framework of a campaign applies to anything that you're working on in your community. We specifically are focused on, we're here for navigating that 21 workshop tomorrow, and so we're using this as an example, but it's also an exercise that you can take back and use for any campaign that you're working on. So when MAP 21 was passed, Advocacy Advance launched a campaign called Navigating MAP 21, where we worked with a representative from every state to communicate the changes that the federal rules and the changes that it meant for biking and walking, and worked with those states to provide any resource that they may need in order to pass a relevant campaign in their state, knowing that every state is different, all the decision makers are different, the messaging, communications are all different. So you're a coordinating body to try to provide resources, and this is how some of these played out. So in Idaho, Cynthia Gibson from the Idaho Pedestrian Bicycle Alliance was the Idaho state contact, as Robin was the Texas state contact here with BikeTexas. And this was really a pressing issue in Idaho because since 2009, Idaho has not spent any of these dedicated biking and walking funds on biking and walking projects. So there was a really pent-up demand for projects, and there was no money coming through to pay for it. So when this past, when the bill passed, they knew there was an option to transfer out. Idaho said it's pretty likely that the Idaho Transportation Department, ITD, is going to transfer out these funds because they haven't spent money on this for 3 years now. So they were very aware that was going to be pretty likely. So what they did is they coordinated a group of partners and really clarified what is this, what is this Transportation Alternatives Program? Why is it important? They spelled out their general campaign idea, and they established a group of partners that were all on board with the same messaging. Cynthia traveled around the state, and she worked with her partners mostly in rural communities around the state, and talked with local people to find out, one, what are projects that have been built in the past that are really popular, and two, what are projects that want to be built but haven't because there hasn't been any funding. And those were the two pieces that they really balanced when working with local mayors and local councils. And they did a ton of public outreach, really getting a lot of signatures, a lot of postcards written. They encouraged everyone to call the members of the Idaho Transportation Department board that was in their region to say, we really want these projects. They haven't been built because we haven't had any money for it. Don't continue this transfer out. They use the media, both social media, op-eds, press releases, to communicate the urgency of this issue. The Idaho Transportation Board received more phone calls on this issue than they have in the history of the board being established. So ultimately, they were successful, and they preserved $1.7 million, and that funding was committed to fund the projects they were intended to, the bicycle and walking projects. So in April 2013, the Transportation Board, they agreed to, yes, this Transportation Alternatives Program, we're going to fund it and implement it as intended in the federal transportation bill. And we're going to make sure that that includes safe routes to school projects, that includes recreational trails program projects, that includes on-street facilities, and includes education programs, and that they're going to fully fund it and not transfer out. In addition, they set up Community Choices for Idaho, which is a tool run by ITD that helps local communities determine what projects they really want to put forward and get developed. So this was a great success. Idaho gets not as much funding as some other states because of their population, but they did preserve the full amount, the $1.7 million set up and dedicated to biking and walking projects. So returning back to our elements, we're going to run through what this means in the process of the campaign. So issue definition, what is the problem? So what's the problem and why is your campaign a solution? In Idaho, their problem was that there were many unfunded projects because the Idaho Transportation Department hadn't spent any of these dollars since 2009. The solution is that the Transportation Department pays for these popular but yet unfunded projects throughout the state. And how to do that is the Idaho Transportation Department should spend the full amount of dedicated bicycle and pedestrian funding allowed in Map 21. So this was their campaign. This was how they defined their issue as they communicated around the state. They established their campaign goals. In the short term, they wanted to travel around the state and really rally people, have people understand what this program is and why it's important, and communicate to the board members that they want transportation choices. In the middle term, they wanted the ITD to start moving beyond this car-centric perspective of transportation funding, hear from their constituents, hear from their elected officials around the state, and really think beyond the car focus. And then at the end of their campaign, their ultimate goal was to secure the full amount of funding on these projects. Organizationally, they wanted to add an additional full-time employee. At this point, they were only half of a staff. They want to double their membership. They want people around Idaho to understand their organization, and they wanted to develop a network of supporters around the state. This was their, and this is really their, this is actually their campaign. This is actually their SWOT analysis. Internally as their organization, their challenge was that they only had half of a full-time employee and 175 members. And they were a new organization, so they didn't really have this track record. It was new for them to take on a funding campaign. I don't want to underestimate, this is really a challenge. It definitely takes a certain level of understanding of the process and capacity of an organization to really take on these types of funding campaigns. They're really important, but for Cynthia and Idaho, the biggest step was the confidence that this is important, she should do it, and just getting over that hump without being able to point to previous records of success. They received grant money from the campaign, actually from Advocacy Advance. They had a board that was all around the state, so they had connections throughout the entire state, and that there was this national framework of success. 49 other states are working on campaigns to get these implemented anyway. They can point to what other states are doing, the success that has been achieved. The challenge is it's a very, very conservative state that is politically conservative, and then within the transportation board, it's just been a very car-centric mentality. Another threat is the way it's set up in the first place. Map 21 actually gives the option to transfer out in the first place. And they're working off of a history of their ITDs has been transferring out of those funds. But some of the opportunities is once you get to the local level and you can really see the quality of life improvements and the safety and health improvements and economic development, especially in Idaho, of these types of facilities and projects. It was very easy for them to garner that local support and to have mayors speak out, to have local communities speak out. The fact that they haven't been funding these projects meant that there's latent demand and some angst and frustration around the fact that this money wasn't going to local communities to build what they've been wanting to see for years. So that got a lot of energy around. And then elected officials love these projects. And this is the area where we're going to dig deeper into after we take a break. But the strategy and power mapping is a process through which to determine who is actually making the decisions. So who is the target that can implement the change you want to see? Who's going to influence that person? And then how can you form your strategy around that? We're going to be doing this as a large group shortly. But for Idaho, has anyone done a power map before?
Sure.
Yeah, a couple people. Has anyone needed to convince somebody and gone kind of kind of went around that person to have somebody else speak for them? Kids are brilliant. Children are brilliant power mappers. They do it all the time. When I wanted to stay up late on a school night, I would ask my dad if he wanted to see Dead Poet Society, which is his favorite movie, and then he was able to convince my mom to let me stay up late to watch his favorite movie with him. So kids are brilliant at this all the time. So the key is that you have one target decision maker. So this should be one person. You can make multiple power maps throughout your campaign because you're going to want to influence different people along the way. But ultimately, you want to find one person who's going to have the power to make the change you want to see. In the case in Idaho, it was Jerry. And Jerry is the chair of the Idaho Transportation Department's board of directors. So this is the governing body of the DOT. There's 7 people on that board, they knew that 3 people weren't convincible. They knew that 3 people were on their side and wanted to see these funds. And they knew that 3 people on the transportation board were never going to want to spend these dollars. So they needed to spend their efforts influencing the chair of the board, who was wavering, who hadn't had his mind made up, so could be influenced. So that was Jerry. So who's going to influence Jerry? Cynthia cannot call up the phone and say, Jerry, I need you to vote for this. She does not have that relationship with him. But there were some people who do. So there were the members of the board that were supportive. So he's going to listen directly to them because they're on the board. It's only 7 people on the board. They have direct influence over Jerry. Mayors throughout the state, state legislators, and then there's a statewide association, I'll call it AIC, the Association of Idaho Cities, the director of that. So they did the power map and like, okay, well, we know that all of these people can influence Jerry. But then how are we going to reach these people? So for the mayors, they went to previous grantees, communities that have received federal dollars for these types of projects that were successful and could say yes, point to these successes. They have local bicycle and pedestrian advisory committees around the state. The Association of Cities listen to local businesses and chambers of commerce. They also listen to the Landscape Association, American Society of Landscape Architects. And YMCA was just one of the health constituents that they had around the state. So what the Idaho Pedestrian and Bicycle Association did is they spent their time and resources and energy influencing these people, partnering with the landscape architects, partnering with the YMCA, going to meetings with the advisory committees to explain how this funding works, garnering up support from local businesses and chambers of commerce, and ask them to speak to these secondary influencers who then speak to Jerry. So we'll go through this as a group, but this is the process. Now that you've seen this, has anyone who's raised their hand, who did not raise their hand before and now think that actually I have done something like this before? It's a way of thinking about influence that it's just a way of structuring that influence. So then once you determine who the influencers are and who you're targeting, you need to think about how you're going to communicate with them. So I already shared at the beginning what the issue definition was in Idaho, that the Idaho Transportation Department was going to transfer funds and instead should spend the full amount of dollars on these transportation projects. The hook that they used in many of these communities was that Idaho hasn't spent these types of dollars since 2009. So when they're talking with grantees and with mayors and all around the state, they've really got a lot of energy and momentum around saying, you haven't seen a dollar from the state in 5 years. Don't you want to make sure that they hear about that and that they change that and that they start putting funding to pay for these projects? So that was their primary hook. And then the tactics, so once you have the communication, what do you actually do to have them hear your message? And again, this comes at the end of the campaign planning. And do you want to go through the tactics criteria?
Sure. So, as Bridget said, a lot of organizations get really excited. They know what the problem is, they know what they want to do, and they just sort of launch right into tactics. And so, one of the things that this process helps you do is slow down a little bit, think really about who you're targeting, and then that will sort of direct some of your tactics. So when you're thinking about what to do, the first question is, will this tactic actually achieve the goal of my campaign? Is it going to persuade the people that I'm trying to persuade, and is it directed at my outcome? Sometimes the way you talk about something can either help build those alliances or can sort of sow those seeds of disagreement. I think at the very beginning, the example that you gave was if you start talking about this as a choice between this or this, that's not going to be a constructive way to unite people. So are your tactics going to strengthen and unite people and not divide your own troops? So we know there are some tactics that are controversial, and we think of a tactic, a campaign tactic that might be controversial and turn off some of your own friends.
Negative campaign?
Negative campaign, so attacking, making it personal, attacking somebody. Sometimes people talk about, and just because they're controversial doesn't mean they're bad, but sometimes people will really lie in the street covered in blood. That might be great because it gets headlines. It might turn some people off. So thinking about tactics that are going to unite people. Is your tactic actually targeted at the person you're trying to convince? Is lying in blood in the street going to convince Jerry to vote your way? And then fun. There's the famous example we were just talking about in Brownsville of the example of in South Carolina there was a big bridge project, and the DOT wasn't on board with it yet, and the Charleston Moves Coalition took out an ad in the newspaper, said, "Thank you, South Carolina DOT. We can't wait to bike on the new bridge path." DOT hadn't decided to build the bridge yet, but now they were publicly being thanked for it. They could decide, are we going to say you're welcome, or are we going to say, wait a minute, we never. So fun tactics. It didn't hurt that they sent 30,000 postcards during a big road race. Everyone that was in the race got a postcard that they could send on this campaign. So fun tactics that can get people's attention. Are your tactics achievable and realistic? I think we know what that means. Can we afford it? Is it a good use of money? And I used the surprising that thank you DOT campaign. Guarantee you it surprised the South Carolina DOT. And so doing something a little bit thinking outside the box. Maybe it's radically changing the way we're talking about bicycling to our opponents and to our friends. And for sure use the media. We'll talk about different audiences and how you talk to different audiences later. But it might be that your target really responds to public opinion. It might be that she doesn't, so you need to take that into account.
Has anyone carried out a tactic that, in retrospect, you wouldn't have done? Maybe it didn't fit these criteria. Like, I spent a lot of resources on that, and it didn't achieve the goal we wanted. Does anyone have that experience? It's already a room very strategic.
May I be a little controversial here?
Okay.
We were in 2001. We were going before legislature led by Robin Stallings to argue against a bill to ban cyclists from farm and market roads. And that was on Monday. And on Friday, we had a critical mass ride out at the middle of Congress Avenue in downtown Austin. And the head of the committee we were speaking to was a former police officer. So we spent the first 45 minutes talking about critical mass.
He was stuck in that traffic jam, really upset on Monday morning, and that was not our tactic to do critical mass, but it was a tactic that happened to be employed at a very bad time. And so that's a good example.
Wasn't one of the participants in the room with you guys?
There were a lot of them in the room.
There's a
that's perfect.
There's a great example of it, and this goes into communications as well. In San Francisco, the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, led by Dave Snyder. San Francisco is the home of critical mass in the United States. And when it first started, everybody hated it, and there was so much fury about these bicyclists. And it was all over the papers, and there was so much anger. It was everywhere. And people were trying to call up and get statements from San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. And Dave was just terrified to have anything to do with critical mass. He's like, we don't, that's not us. It's completely separate, And his friend, who worked in the media at that time, called him up and he said, what's going on? What are you saying? He's like, I'm staying out of it. He's like, that is your problem. Everybody in the city is talking about bicycling right now, and you are avoiding it, and you're removing yourself from it. So you need to find a way to communicate about it where it brings it back to your issue and your goals. So he had an emergency, media training, and met with this colleague that he had his whole staff in, and called up media, said, call me. We set up meetings to discuss it. And so then the media was interviewing him, and they said, what do you think about critical mass? What do you think about critical mass? And he said, you know what? Bicyclists are mad. They're angry because we have a bicycle plan that is sitting on a shelf. And so all of a sudden it became about the bicycle plan, and it came about what the vision was for the city that wasn't being implemented. And he never said, yeah, that was us. He just said, bicyclists are mad. Bicyclists are angry because there's a plan that's sitting on a shelf. That is a way that even if you're even in San Francisco, critical mass is a controversial thing. So that's a way, if you find yourself in that position, how can you communicate where it still brings it back to your issue and your ultimate goals? So it became about his campaign plan to implement the bike plan. So that's a great example. What Idaho did, again, they created the partnerships. They created that coalition that I showed the picture of at the beginning. So it's not just them, but they're speaking out with the YMCA and the League of Conservation Voters and Landscape Architects and the Chamber of Commerce. They published op-eds, did a lot of social media. They did have one particularly friendly ITD board member who, right here. So they met with this woman directly to say, how can we communicate this? How can we reach Jerry and any of the other board members who aren't supportive? So that inside advice, that inside advocate. They met with staff, so all this focus has been about the board, the governing body, but staff is really key too. So they met with the staff to say, how can we get buy-in internally? And then they demonstrated the need for funds. Again, a fundraising can be a week-long training in itself. I'll just point out here that campaigns are a really great opportunity to raise funds for your organization. It's always easier to win funding in the midst of a campaign. In Idaho's example, they did get a rapid response grant from Advocacy Advance, which we spend on organizations that have the opportunity to win public funding for biking and walking. And even at $3,000, that was everything she needed to be able to do all the travel around the state. And that's how she used the funds. It has been used in the past for lobbying work and all different types of things, perhaps getting out the vote. But for her, it was the travel around the state to really make sure that she was making those connections. So with that, we're going to take a break, but after the break, the presentation part is over. So we're going to focus afterwards on really collaborating on the elements of power mapping, communication, and tactics. And we'll start up the break with any questions. So if there's, when we come back, if there's anything that is on your mind that you want to check in about, we'll have an opportunity for that. So we'll come back at 2:30.
Is everybody comfortable? Is anybody too cold?
It's chilly in here.
It is chilly?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you want?
I'll switch it.
Lunch area.
Or if you're going online, I think you can make.
Turn it a little bit colder so that when we heat it up, the room will be okay.
to that right now. So we're going to come back together.
Yes.
Everybody online, please. I guess let Christy know that you can hear me. Just a few people, that would be great. Thanks for being with us. I hope you all had a chance to take a break. And now you're back. Okay, well, so as you were getting cheese and vegetables and so forth, did you have any questions about the first part? Any questions, thoughts, ideas you're dying to express before we proceed? All make sense? The hope is that this is pretty common sense stuff, but just put into a little package, put into a framework where you can walk through the steps in a systematic way and make sure you're checking off boxes as you're thinking through your campaign. So I'm actually going to have Jack come up and talk a little bit about basically the same situation that they have in Idaho, where with fighting for the Transportation Alternatives Program, what the context is here in Texas. And that should have brought that screen, and that'll do that.
So Texas gets about 10% of the entire federal Transportation Alternatives Program funding. So we have, 73 million or so to work with per year, and as per federal rules, that half of that gets allocated to the NPOs, large NPOs and small NPOs. This graphic isn't totally correct. The green portion is actually larger than the blue portion, but the portion that we're going to talk about today is the red portion, and that's the other half of that money that goes to the state for them to do a statewide call for projects or to transfer out. And they haven't done anything official yet with TAP money. They haven't written the rules, and right now they have proposed some rules that have been in the Texas Register. They're taking comment on those rules, and so we're now into 2 years of funding that could be a potential call for projects. And the NPOs are all going to be doing a project call that includes 2 years of funding. However, even though they haven't written the rules yet, they did transfer out 29 million out of a possible about 34 million from last year's funds. It's already moved out of transportation alternatives to another program where they can spend it on just about any road transportation projects. So in Texas, our campaign that we're working on is stopping that transfer that already happened and stopping future transfers and making sure that we do a call for projects that could have a huge benefit across the state. 2 years amount of funding, about $74 million.
So, Jack, just a minor point. Yeah, so they've transferred it out. What you're saying is there's no real technical barriers for them to transfer it back again, or no,
correct.
No regulatory barriers.
Yeah, they could also spend that money that they've transferred out on bike ped, but history shows that money from STP Flex does not get spent on bike projects. It never has. So getting it put back into TAP where the rules that they proposed had said that it's going to be spent on biking and walking projects, that's the key goal. So just another breakdown of the funds available for Texas. This is 2014 funds. 2013 funds were a little bit less, but none of those have been spent. And so basically all of these amounts are doubled for what could be an upcoming call for projects at the state. And so the problem that we're looking at in terms of this campaign is that funds designed for biking and walking, building this infrastructure that helps us reach our vision, are being funneled to other uses. And this is a problem that we've seen in the past when it was transportation enhancements and the state had to give money back to the federal government. They took it from transportation enhancements instead of taking it from all their programs. And that's a campaign that we've fought in the past and won. So that helps us know that this campaign is winnable. We were able to save $75 million before from transportation enhancements. So the solution that we're looking at is increasing these funds that are available basically by making sure that all the funds that have been designated for the TAP program from the federal government are made available here in the state. And we're framing it as improving the access of Texas children and families to quality infrastructure and programs for healthy lifestyles. So how we'll achieve this is stopping the transfers out of TAP and fully spending these dollars on biking and walking infrastructure programs. Yeah.
Are these all infrastructure dollars?
Eligible in TAP is non-infrastructure programs. Currently, the proposed rules make non-infrastructure programs ineligible.
That's the state rules.
That's the state rules.
Okay.
So at the MPOs, they set their own rules, whether they want to do infrastructure or non-infrastructure.
Okay.
So just real quick jump in. It used to be that you could use transportation enhancements dollars on adult bike education. You no longer can at the federal level. So that's not a text dot decision. That's Congress. However,
It's your fault.
yes. However, Safe Routes to School program is eligible. So education programs for 8 to 80, K through 12, are still eligible under all of TAP.
But also very material is we used to get some of that money as Safe Routes to School to do our bike safety education program for kids. And technically it's eligible for that activity, but not to be given to nonprofits anymore. So the only way we could do a program like that would be if a government entity got the grant and then contracted with a nonprofit group to actually do bike safety education. So you can no longer be the direct recipient from the DOT, but if another entity got the money, you could theoretically get it from them. Correct, Aaron?
Yes. Yes, you can collaborate with agency partners. That's explicitly in the guidance.
Does that include state agencies like TAA
Well,
could apply?
They could, but TxDOT can't give it to itself. So we can't partner with TxDOT and do a program with them. They have to give it to somebody else who could then subcontract with us. And by the way, we have no plans to do that right now. It's way complicated to set up that kind of a deal with the time frame and the bandwidth required. So we're not actually working on that. We're working on saving this for infrastructure and potentially for Safe Routes to School programs through the local level. It's not part of our plans to try to get it to fund our current type of program. We may wait till the next versions when that capability comes back into the federal level that they can give money to nonprofits. That's in the agenda for the future at the federal level.
It is in the agenda, but notice I'm not promising anything. All right. So I actually want, for the folks on the internet, I just want to have Christy talk real quick about how we're going to work this conversation piece out, because we want to hear everybody's voice.
So I'm just keeping everyone on mute just because sometimes there's feedback, but if you want to contribute to the conversation, send me a question on GoToWebinar or a chat message, and I will raise my hand for the group to make sure that I get some time, and I will either unmute you if you have microphone capability. If you don't, I will say your comment out loud if you type it via questions or chat box.
Okay. If you have any questions for the people in cyberspace, you can chat them to Christy right now, and we can figure it out. So. And
then there's also just 2 additions to people on the line. We have Warren Castile, who's on his mobile phone, so we'll see how that works out. And Victor Cordero from El Paso, who his vision is to get his local elected officials on board by creating awareness and changing paradigms from existing car-centric to placing more emphasis on pedestrian and cyclists as transportation.
Great. And I know from Twitter we have some El Paso people actively tweeting, so feel free to keep doing that. So we're going to work through the example that Jack just gave. I want to just ask you all in the room and elsewhere, does this feel like a relevant issue? So does anyone know of a transportation enhancements, Safe Routes to School, recreational trail program that has benefited your community? I see some nodding, not a ton.
Yep.
Yes, okay. So we know basically that a lot of the projects that, when you're riding on it, feel like a local project, that money came down, trickled down, a lot of it from the federal government, state, as well as local. So we know that the network that we're trying to build and we're trying to ride on to build some of the programs that we take advantage of, a lot of that is made possible by dollars like TAP dollars. We were just in Brownsville, and they were celebrating like an $8 million.
800,000.
800,000. Okay, all right. So it's not as big as I thought, but still a real project that is going to happen because of this type of money. So.
By the way, that's money from the enhancement dollar, the $75 million that we saved. was just issued 5 years later. You know,
Yeah.
many years ago we had, but
yeah,
the money
so
does
it takes
eventually get
time.
spent.
Yep, yep. So I just want to reinforce that this may seem high level. It may be a long time before our communities see the impact of it, but it's really, really critical. This money goes away. It's just a lot harder to get anything done with the state money that's left. So I think it's a really important fight. So we're going to walk through it. That said, the same thought process can apply to any campaign you're working on.
And Darren, quickly, it's also a really exciting time, because as I mentioned, we do many of these. This is our 6th, this will be our 7th actually, workshop of this year. And communities are at all different stages of spending these federal funds and making these types of decisions. And this is the most exciting place I think we've been all year, as far as it's so timely right now. And tomorrow, a lot of these people we're about to talk about are going to be in the room. So going through this is going to be really
And can I give some other quick examples? For example, in Austin, where the Pfluger Bridge got about $1 million of enhancements, it's one of our most iconic projects here. But this is the kind of money that could fund the Austin Bike Plan in 4 years. It could completely fund the $140 million bike plan. Or it could fund the 130-mile Northeast Texas Trail and benefit 19 rural communities. Houston just passed $100 million for their bike trail plan, but it's in that scale. It could be $30 million projects, not just $2 million projects or $70 million projects. So it could benefit a lot of the work they're trying to do in Amarillo with their stuff, network in El Paso. So ultimately, this is the kind of money that can get some big, exciting projects done in any given community. Not all of them at once, but over time, nearly everybody could get something big out of this.
Great. So, all right. I see applause. All right. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna make this a reality right now, at least in our minds. Bridget walked through the Idaho power map, real world example of targeting decision makers, and we're going to dive right in. Jack mentioned the rulemaking right now that's happening where who is it? Who are the commissioners? It's the
Transportation Commission.
Texas Transportation Commission right now figuring out the rules that are going to impact the TAP program.
That's the equivalent of the Idaho Board of Directors.
And they have posted them, and they're proposing them, and they'll go through if we don't do anything about it. And we're going to provide very detailed comments and maybe build a campaign around our proposed improvements to their rules, for example.
Right.
That's one thing we might do.
Yeah, so that would be one sort of step, one tactic in this campaign. The ultimate campaign, is, as Jack mentioned, is to stop transfers out of TAP and fully spend those dollars on biking and walking. So to make that happen, we want to go through the thought process. Who has the power to stop the transfers out of that program and fully spend those dollars on biking and walking infrastructure program? So the first step in this power mapping is literally asking that question. But can anybody answer that with knowledge that's already in the room? Who has the power to make this decision? You can think about the Idaho example. You can think about what folks just said.
Probably politicians.
Yep. Any particular?
State politicians.
Yep. Okay.
The chair of the TTC.
Chair of the TTC. Yep.
I'd like to make a distinction between politicians and professionals.
Uh-huh.
The politicians we elect, professionals as people get appointed and that kind of stuff. So in this case, we're probably talking about professionals who have not been elected, do not answer to the public, but are in a position.
Actually, I would almost say that there's a third step, and that the commissioners are civic leaders, and the people that actually have a paycheck from the department.
Yes.
So there's some professionals, but this appointed board is different. They're not exactly professionals necessarily.
Yeah, but I think the distinction you're making, Preston, between people that are elected and people that are not elected is important. An additional layer to that distinction is
elected, appointed, and then staff.
Yeah. And I should say, we're going to do one. We might have time to do a couple. In any given campaign, it's probably not one person that you're going to try and persuade, right? So it may be the governor, because the governor may be able to exert a lot of influence to get that final call. Maybe a tough one, maybe an easy one, depending on the state. So maybe a statewide elected official. It may be also an appointed official, and it might be also a professional, technical professional. Probably you're going to need all of those people at least not opposing you in order to get this decision made. So we could spend the next week power mapping all those different people, and we'd be doing the right thing. So for the sake of this conversation, let's start with one. And I heard one example from the Texas Transportation Commission. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong at any point. Anybody? Is the chair the right person there?
I have a question about, do we want to target somebody that we think is persuadable, or do we want to target somebody who's like really tough and turn them around, or do we want to go to our best friend?
Okay, great question, Robin. The answer is really you're not going to waste your energy on someone that already agrees with you and is already picking up the phone on your behalf, right? That's not the person we're targeting, and that person that is for sure your worst enemy. I can think of a couple in the Senate. We're not going to waste our time on them either. We're going to find that person, that potential swing voter, the person in the Idaho Transportation Commission who was the chair in that case, who was a swing vote. He rules with you, you're good. He rules against you, you're sunk. So is there someone on the do we know enough right now to know if there's someone on the commission who's that swing vote? And when you're doing this theoretical brainstorming, you might not know. But when you're really doing your campaign, the first thing you're going to do is find the answer to that. So for the sake of this conversation, we can pick our best guess. If anybody has a good thought.
I could suggest that there are two of the most likely persuadable members of the commission.
Okay.
One would be either Commissioner Mosley from Houston or Commissioner Underwood from Lubbock, and less likely might be the chair from El Paso,
okay,
or the commissioner from Tyler.
So you said persuadable. Are they already persuaded? Because if so, we're not going to waste our time. Okay. So give me a name of one of those persuadable people.
I would say Commissioner Mosley in Houston.
All right, great. So we have, and that's.
He's got another E in it, M-O-S-E-L-E-Y.
I love being the scribe because it's really fun, but I'm always not from the place, so I get the names wrong. So please feel free to correct my spelling. I was trying to spell Hawaiian words and it was just embarrassing. Okay, so the important thing here is we know Commissioner Mosley's name, right? So you can't really target someone if you don't know who they are. So that's an important first step. So we know that Commissioner Mosley represents, or it comes out of Houston. So who does the Commissioner of Houston listen to?
Probably, well, as I say, could be Texas legislators in that area. I don't know if it would be just Republicans or it could be some Democrats. I think Robin has probably a strong idea about a lot of this stuff.
Oh, it's not the Robin show. So actually, it's really one of the fresh things is y'all are bringing a fresh eye, and we're in the weeds. So it's really helpful to have you all, your point of view on this stuff.
Probably the mayor.
Mayor reps.
Yep, great. Do we know the mayor's name? I mean, I don't, but I'm sure you do.
And he's Parker now, but yeah, and he's Parker.
And she'll be there for at least another year.
Okay.
Through 16. She leaves at January 16th.
All right, that's great. That's the perfect thought process. It really makes sense that the commissioner from Houston would listen to the Houston mayor. I mean, that's the kind of, these folks are talking to each other all the time. And if there's a consensus against biking, they're all, that's going to be in the air. If you start moving that conversation in the right direction, that's going to have important influence. We got someone on the phone?
Two people online, Victor and Scott White, will say Ted Houghton. Houghton is a lost cause.
Okay.
He rides with the city to bike run.
Okay, who is that?
Chair of the Texas Transportation Commission.
All right.
And I think that they probably nailed that he would be a difficult one to persuade.
Okay, so gold star, perfect thought process. Not our target right now. Once we've got everybody else, maybe.
You listen to whoever appoints him.
Okay. Yeah. So figure out who appointed them, and it's the governor, right? I think we know that. So we can put Governor Perry here. We can then decide whether or not that's going to be a top priority, right? So it's important to to not waste our time on lost causes. Sometimes you're going to tip your strategy. If you go to the governor who's already against you and say, "Oh, we're gonna get the commissioner on board," well, the governor can pick up the phone and say, "Commissioner, do not listen." Right? So it's important. Maybe I'll put a little,
Make it radioactive.
Yeah, right. So just remember that as you're thinking about, there are people that have the power to influence the person you want to make the decision who may not be your secondary targets.
Okay, I need help from you guys who are actually plugged in. Representative Rodney Ellis, is he still in, and would he be the person we would want to be talking to most?
He definitely would be one of them, but he's on the super friendly category of one of those influencers, right?
Yep.
And I think you could say state senators from Houston. There's quite a number of them, including Republicans like Larry Taylor or Dan Patrick, who's about to could be the next lieutenant governor, but he's currently a state senator out of Houston. So.
And ESPN commentator.
Formerly, he actually had his own radio talk show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's not the ESPN.
I was trying to make a joke again.
Congressional representatives from Houston, I mean, they have the state been wanting to get these federal dollars spent in their area, but does the Texas Transportation Commission listen to them?
Well, then you got some that are friendly, like Sheila Jackson Lee, who would probably make a call for us. Very friendly on bike issues. Well, it's hard to say who Mosley listens to because we don't know yet. We're speculating right now. But he talks to Democrats. He's not like a guy that doesn't talk across party lines. We don't even know what his party is.
Okay.
We just know he's appointed by a Republican governor. But.
Okay.
Business leaders.
Great. So that's a perfect segue to this third circle, which is our public audiences.
Victor also says that Senator Jose Rodriguez is friendly towards cyclists.
Okay.
He's an El Paso senator.
That may or may not be too relevant, but if you got him on the phone and you can have it, hey, do you know Commissioner Mosley? Do you have any connection there?
Well, he's on the Transportation Commission. The Transportation Committee in the Senate. So, for example, Senator Rodriguez is also.
Okay, that was Leslie Rodriguez.
Jose Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And then you said Chamber of Commerce, right?
Yeah, business leaders.
Business leaders. Okay. So, who do these people listen to, right? And I think you nailed that one. So it sounds like you were kind of leaning Houston business leaders.
I'd also say health organizations because the medical centers there.
Great. Yep.
And I think instead of health organizations, say the medical center.
Yeah.
Because
they employ it.
If we could get to somebody at the medical center, they could be really powerful.
Great. So is that the Houston Medical Center?
Texas Medical Center. It is.
Great. And so that can be, if I put them here, I'm thinking about them as an entity. So maybe there's a board of the medical center. If we know the person that runs the medical center, then they might go here as that direct influencer. So this is that institutional level of type of Chamber of Commerce, two other folks.
Well, I think one thing to research, and I don't know if anyone knows enough, but just what is Mosley's background, like professional or personal background, and then trying to find personal or professional contacts that way. So if he has a history in the road building industry, or if he has a history in
I'm not sure. It's really easy to find his bio. It's there right up the text on the site.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So if he's an engineer,
so maybe generically we'd say personal, professional. Private professional interests or something, connections?
Yeah.
One of the former commissioner chairman and I went to school together in engineering school. And so it was very easy for me just to talking about that, to have a conversation with him.
Great. So I'm going to say professional interest, e.g., what was the first thing you said his background is?
He was a lawyer. Right?
We can look at that.
Yeah,
it seems like he was a lawyer, but not
e.g. lawyers, engineers. Yeah.
And personal interest too. If he's from a particular locale, you can point to, well, yeah. If he's from a particular locale, then he might have more personal connections there.
Yep.
Yeah, like church.
Church.
Get his minister.
So that's that has actually been done. Or like, you know, I know the pastor or the priest, and we're able to have a bike to worship weekend, and then we built support in that congregation, and then the church leader then makes that phone call for us.
What about the county commissioners? Because they're the ones who are really driving these outer belts. And the one I think of is Steve Raddick, who doesn't like bicycles, but ostensibly has said in the past that he wants to see them separated out. Do you know much about Raddick?
Actually, Raddick's done some great stuff for trails on the west side of Houston. He's been a real champion for trail facilities.
And he's a real road warrior.
But so he could be very credible because he's actually done some good stuff for bike stuff. So
okay,
Commissioner Raddick.
R-A-D-A-C-K.
And possibly people from the energy companies, maybe like people you don't expect to be supportive, but they're real big in Houston.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're.
This circle is when we can think back to that group of coalition leaders that they did in Idaho, where it was. Anybody remember who they got? YMCA. That might be good. Maybe there's a Houston one. Maybe there's a Texas-wide one.
We have a complete streets coalition in Houston that includes, medical interests and AARP and even AAA. So we might be able to tap our some existing complete streets interests at the and the Texas Pediatric Society and on that we're already in coalition with on complete streets, either at state level or in Houston, that might come on board.
That's great. And mentioning AAA, they fall into that category of make sure they're not against you. Sometimes you're going to be targeting these folks and you're going to make them allies, and they're going to. AARP is getting complete streets legislation passed all over the country in partnership with bicycle and walking groups. AAA really depends on the region. You got, unfortunately, Mid-Atlantic, where we're in Maryland, my neck of the woods. They have come out against everything we try and do. California, same thing. But then you have places in between. In the national AAA, pretty supportive, very interested in doing communications, talking about share the road and so forth. So making sure they're not going to fall into that Mid-Atlantic and California category and be an ally.
And little known fact, Texas AAA is owned by Southern California AAA. Northern California is a separate AAA, and there are nonprofits that are kind of owned and absorbed and did all these different things over the years, but it's not independent here in Texas. So they get their legislative direction from Southern California.
I can't remember if Southern California folks were there.
It's not been helpful, mostly, but they did come around on California complete streets eventually.
Yeah.
They did come around on our safe passing bill eventually and supported that. So there is movement there.
Okay.
And Scott White has lots of comments, but
Scott.
on the outside, he wants to include local bike shops and local environmental groups.
Well, actually, okay, so I'm going to write bike shops.
Sierra Club.
All right. And we're going to say Sierra Club. We think these folks are going to listen to Sierra Club? All right.
No.
Is it going to hurt us?
Could.
Yeah, especially ours. Especially ours.
So I'm going to give some squiggles. Neighborhood association. Now that's great.
And really quickly, this is a state campaign, so that target is at the state level. Well, a lot of times when you are implementing this framework for a local campaign, oftentimes it'll be the mayor, or it'll be a county executive, it'll be someone local in that center. So I think the neighborhood association is like the perfect example of you're looking at the mayor kind of put on that framework of the work that you do, like how do you mobilize your community partners to influence the mayor. So consistently, it's like thinking about that.
Yeah, and I would just echo that, but say I think it's really relevant, even though it's a statewide campaign. This guy's a statewide representative or leader. The people that you're trying to influence here are oftentimes local. So if you're trying to get to we know Mayor Parker, I think, is sympathetic already. Very. But if she were more borderline, then you would really need to get to her neighborhood associations.
The Texas legislatures and the national Congress people listen to the neighborhood associations because that's their constituents right there in their neighborhood. So I love to see them up there just because we're influencing the people who can influence most.
That's exactly right. And a lot of times people will say the public or voters, and that's okay, but that's a heavy lift. But getting to those neighborhood associations, a couple of meetings, a couple of relationships.
MPO has the staff or the boards. And is Houston MPO head coming to Austin, or who's the
HJC has Luke Dawson as head of Austin.
So MPO is Metropolitan Planning Organizations, regional planning governance entities.
Yeah, and there's staff head, and there's also just more leaders on the board as well.
Yep.
And those I would imagine those people talk quite a bit to, I mean, relatively to TTC members.
And they have a bike advisory committee on the MPO as well. That might be a group on the outside.
Great. So
one more is that they passed this $100 million bond package, and it was matched by some local donor. So whoever that guy is.
Yep. Yeah. No, donors are often. I won't write whoever that guy is, but donor or donors can be that's the way the game is played, right? And that's the kind of question you ask. So I think we have time for another one, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions on this? And then the next one will be easy because we're already in the thought process. So the first thing we said is we're not going to get that one commissioner and then call it a day. And we put a bunch of people on here that may not already be with us, that might be bored of one, right? So whether or not we use the Houston commissioner example or another one, somebody throw out somebody else that's going to be really important in getting this decision.
And just so you know, there's 5 commissioners on the Texas Transportation Commission.
Okay, so you could do, just at the commissioner level, you could do 5 power maps and figure out who your network needs to be, right? But we can do another level going, because I know a lot of folks here don't work at the state level necessarily, but you have a lot of connections at the local level. So who is someone locally who's going to trickle up and be really useful when we're trying to get to our commission?
So I mean, locally, of course, we are targeting people all over the state, so it might be generically locally, like, for example, would it be impactful if we got letters from our city councils, or is that worth the effort? You know, going to the Transportation Commission, save this money. Then that becomes something that each person can kind of work on within their own city.
Yep.
You know, what would it take to get, that?
Yep.
Or we could pick another transportation commissioner in a completely different city.
I think we got that level. I mean, unless anyone really wants to do another commissioner and has some specific ideas about how it would be different, I think maybe we pick another level. Whether it's a key
Say mayor's level, get a letter from the mayor in each of these towns or something, so that's one person.
Yeah. So everyone can do. Is there a suggestion at the more local level?
Scott White said all mayors.
All mayors, and I think that's kind of where Robin's going too. When you're power mapping, you got to narrow it down. But of course, we know that this is an exercise that we would all do in our own. So.
In addition to primary decision makers, there are people who give them information. And in TxDOT, that information will flow up through the operations side of the business. And so the head of operations for TxDOT may well be somebody that we want on our list.
Okay. Yeah. Do you mean as a center, or do you mean?
I think eventually doing a power map around that, because they're the people who write the rules.
Yes. Tell me the name again.
The commission doesn't write the rules. The operations committee, or the division writes the rules.
Okay. Ops division.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it happens to be Mark Williams, who's director of planning, one of the divisions, which is kind of a parallel to operations.
Okay. Head of planning, director of planning?
Director. Yeah, he's the division director.
So he's the guy that's going to flow the information up to the commissioners. So here's what we ought to do.
Very, very important.
They make the decision, but they don't do the work to figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Let's do a mayor. I'm trying to figure out how to do a universal mayor. I don't really want to do it that theoretical. So let's pick a mayor that's going to be helpful in getting to a commissioner.
I would say not the mayor of Austin. It's almost too easy. Okay. And
how would you do the mayor of Austin? How do you get to the mayor of Austin?
Just go out to dinner with him.
Okay. All right.
Really?
Go.
Really? Everyone here is in the middle circle.
Right. Everyone, you are all here. When we do this is true. The people, sometimes the people that are targets are in the room, which is always awkward. But it's oftentimes the folks in this room are really needs their names here in big bold letters.
In Texas, we basically have 5 major population centers, so one of those mayors should be the one. Throw out Austin.
Yep.
And we've
Give me
already
another
dealt a
one.
lot with
We've done Houston. Give me another one.
We've already done.
Well, I was going to say we look at the mayor of Lubbock because it's also a transportation commission, even though he's not one of the big cities. It's also a more conservative city.
Right.
So I'd say like a conservative city like Fort Worth or Lubbock or Amarillo, where the mayor would be regarded as a Republican.
Well, we have Amarillo on the line. Do we have anybody from Lubbock on the line?
We have Lubbock in the room.
Oh, okay, great. Are we prepared to do Lubbock? All right. Who is the mayor of Lubbock? And how do you spell Lubbock?
First one.
B-O-C-K. B-O.
Maybe we should skip to Amarillo.
No.
We do know the mayor of Amarillo. I was going to say, and there's also Amarillo's on the phone.
Yeah.
El Paso's also on the phone.
It's almost too easy. Yeah.
Somebody get a decision.
Visit.
From Lubbock,
Okay.
Cowboy.
All right. Give him a cowboy hat. Is that a cowboy hat? All right. Mayor Robinson of Lubbock, Texas. All right. Who does Mayor Robinson of Lubbock, Texas, the cowboy list?
President of Texas Tech.
Nice. Do we know the president's name?
No.
Okay.
Kent Lance.
Googleable.
Kent. Yeah. Maybe Kent Hans is a separate.
Okay, who is Ken Hans?
He's the chancellor of Texas Tech University, but he retired, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. What? Possibly influential?
Yeah.
Kent
Hans.
H-A-N-T.
Thank you.
Another person Mayor Robinson would listen to would be the head of the Texas Youth Council.
You said Youth Council?
Beef. We're in Texas.
Yeah.
You remember where you are.
Yeah. All right. And are we so in Texas we know that person's name?
No, and also
we have contact.
it seems one of those that,
Association.
Okay.
like it could be very difficult. I'm guessing the beef council might be a very big challenge.
I'm hearing the connection with the cattle.
Cattlemen's Association.
Cattlemen's.
Yeah. City Council.
The Beef Council is amazingly.
This is one of the most interesting programs.
Yeah, the Beef Council is amazingly open to people.
All right. They're gettable if they hear that they're the people they care about.
Oil and gas.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Beef Council is here.
Yeah.
These are both public audiences.
Yeah.
Unless we know the president's name and have a connection. I heard somebody back here talking about
Oil and gas. I think that's the third green one too, right?
Agriculture.
I want to get back to those because we'll figure out who we're talking about there. But I heard a more specific insight.
Veterinary medical school.
Okay. Great.
David Jones, head of the LAPO.
Great. So it's here because we know the person's name.
Did Ryerson sit on the MBF?
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Great. This is a good one. Any inside circle people? The mayor's gonna listen
I
to?
take that back. He sits on part of the MPO.
Okay.
There's 2 different sections of it.
So I think we'd have to say a city council person, right, to get to the mayor.
Todd Klein.
Todd Klein. All right.
City Council. Very friendly. Cyclist.
Great. And the fact that Todd Klein is friendly is actually very helpful because you want to get your friends. They're the people that are going to be able to make that phone call for you without having to power map them all over. That's great.
What about people that run that half Ironman in Lubbock? That's a pretty big.
Marty Greer.
White Greer.
Yes.
White Greer. What was the name of the Ironman? Is this Buffalo?
Buffalo Springs Ironman.
It's a 70.3 race.
So I'm gonna. Right. Ooh, sounds hot. I'm gonna put Mike Greer. You said right, and then I'm gonna put Iron Man out here. because there might be a way to play that both ways. Get him to pick up the phone himself and take advantage of all the participants.
There's actually several races that they do. It's not just the Ironman.
Okay.
But that's the biggest one they do.
Yes.
That's what they're known for.
Yep. And it might be easier to pick a smaller one to start and do that, and then.
He's like the race director for like a lot of races.
Okay. Sorry, I know the people online are not going to be able to read this.
Can you? I've been trying to type it, but now I can't read it.
Okay, this is Mike Greer. He is the race director that runs Ironman and other races. We've got Todd Klein, who's a city council person in Levitt, head of the med school, president of Texas Tech. Davey Jones, who is the executive of the MPO.
Yes.
We have Kip Hance, who maybe emeritus chancellor of Texas Tech. Am I getting that right?
Mm-hmm. Former politician.
Former politician. Okay, great. And then on the outside, we have the Cattlemen's Association. That's seriously a first for me in tarmacking. The Texas Beef Council. Oil and gas. So when we say oil and gas in Texas or Lubbock, who are we talking about?
Any companies. I don't know what companies operate in Lubbock.
It'd be exploration and production. You might not be ExxonMobil, but just the drilling outfit.
Yeah.
How about Covenant? Don't they own a lot of the medical facilities there? It's a big Covenant something.
So I think we've convinced. I think we have a good roadmap here. These are probably the right people. Some harder than others, some easier. But at this level, you can really get to a man. A few of the right phone calls, and you can flip that mayor so that they're a big ally. So I mean, if you would not have to get this whole list to make some real headway there.
One we forgot but can't mention for Midland is the school districts.
Right.
When we're talking about safe routes to school and
You
all
mean
these
for
places.
Lubbock?
Yeah, well, can't mention it for Midland, and so
Yep. So sometimes it's PTA, sometimes it's the school head.
superintendent.
The ISD, Independent School District.
Which, by the way, the state PTA could actually help us with the commissioners also because of the safe routes to school.
Yep. Yep.
So local PTA to the mayor, safe routes to school, and state PTA to Mosley, safe routes to school.
Great. Yeah. Any questions on this? Any burning final thoughts?
I'm not assuming you're going to get there. I know you will tomorrow, but this is really good. But at each level, we have a different message. And so
We'll talk about that in a minute.
at some point, we have to step back and say, what do we tell the state PTA so they will go to somebody who will then go to Mosley, and we get the right message moving all the way up.
Yep. You are predicting future slides.
Thank you.
You didn't mention this, just in principle, how do competitors play a role? So let's say you have an election coming up, or you have some other political leader in a local community who's not necessarily going to be agreeable to the target, but if you can get them to be a supporter, that it indirectly helps them come along. Does that make sense? So okay, so it could be a former, political component. I mean, would you actually?
Do you mean an opponent of? If this was an elected official, you put Governor Perry in the middle here. Right?
Yeah.
You're saying, would making it an election issue force him to be more? That works both ways. Because one of the great examples of people getting involved in elections is Cascade in Seattle and in Washington State, and they have won some. Sometimes they have a tax status that allows them to get really. But just real quick. Sometimes they've picked. They've endorsed somebody, and the other person wins, and their first call is, "How can I get your endorsement next time?" And sometimes they endorse somebody, and the opponent wins, and they're on the enemy list.
Right, I wasn't even going that far. I was just saying, actually have the opponent, either in an upcoming election or even a previous election, if they're still a community leader, say that they're for a certain thing. And so then it helps create pressure for the primary target. It's not necessarily a direct conversation that they're going to have, but it's about. So anyway, I mentioned it. We don't need to go spend too much time on it.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point in that people are going to take the political temperature and figure out what's in the wind, and is this a winning issue or is this a losing issue? And our goal is to make it a winning issue. All right. So thank you for that, and thank you for the folks on the phone. By popular request, we're going to talk about messaging and communications. First we'll start sort of broad with this, and then we'll get a little bit more specific. One of the things we're talking about now is Map 21, and when Map 21 was passed, a lot of the bike walk folks were a little bit disappointed. We felt like some of the things that already came up, like adult education is not eligible in transportation enhancements. It was not the bill we quite wanted. And so we did a lot of soul searching, how can we be more effective? And so we had a member, and it's kind of like power mapping. Our membership has a lot of power in it. And one of our members was a political consultant. And so he offered to give us a discounted rate, and he said, I will interview 60 people in the federal transportation scene, so members of Congress, people in the Obama administration, and staff, legislative staff. Give me a list of 30 friends and 30 opponents, and I'm going to just interview them. If they answer the phone. Actually, we gave them a list of 50. You got about 30 on each side on the phone. And ask them how we're doing with our messaging and what works and how they're hearing what we're saying. So it was really interesting. And yes, it's Congress, but we're finding that a lot of this resonates. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how this makes sense to you. So at the National Bike Summit, other times we say investing in bicycling and walking means more people will bike and walk. So do it. That's the reason to do it. Congress said more people bike and walk. So what? What's a better message than if you spend money, they'll do it? Bicycling and walking helps create vibrant communities where people want to live, work, and spend money. So you're not doing it so they walk and bike. You're doing it so they come to your town, they live there, the jobs follow, and boom, that matters. Turn it back. We good? Okay. So we said, and we will hang out, but I love it for the figure. We said for years, we need a fair share for safety. 16% of people that die in traffic fatalities are on foot, walking or biking. Almost nothing is spent from safety money on biking and walking. We need a fair share for safety. That's what we say. They hear, well, that's an entitlement. It's a money grab. Really, you're gonna use fatalities to get money? And finally, the one that really stung me when I heard it was a fair share of what? How about we give you a fair share of what bicyclists pay into the Highway Trust Fund? Which at bicyclists is nothing. So that really reversed that argument, and we stopped saying fair share. We were printing the fact sheets. and we said, hold the presses.
And entitlement is a pejorative word from their point of view.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, no, right. This is you entitled bicyclists.
You're actually entitled, sort of like.
Yeah, pejorative. Yes, absolutely. That message is, look, we need to create safer streets. Safer streets that benefit everybody. Have they lost me?
No.
Oh, they just don't do that. Yeah. We need to spend our dollars strategically to create safer streets. Places that are safer to walk and safer to bike have been statistically shown to be safer to drive as well. So safer streets for bicyclists and people on foot are going to help everybody. And we're a cheap date. It's a great return on investment. Building a pedestrian improvement is a heck of a lot cheaper than putting in guardrails across your entire highway system. So those are the messages that resonated about it. We believe biking and walking reduces congestion and improves air quality and reduces emissions. We believe that, right? If you're on your bike, you're biking, you're not driving. They say, sounds anti-car to me, and we don't believe you. Never going to be enough people biking in Texas to really mitigate congestion, people going across the border or downtown Houston. So the better message is, look, let's invest in transportation choices, transportation options that everybody can use to create a complete transportation network. So think about these things. We're not saying we have all the answers, and there's certainly these who you're talking to matters. But just think if this rings true to you. So, I want to just quickly. This is I think maybe what Preston's been waiting for, but you know, one of the things we know is you have to know your audience. So if you're trying to convince the safety commissioner, you're going to maybe use a separate set of arguments than if you're trying to convince your neighbor to try riding a bike for the first time. So, folks on the phone, folks in the room, let's just start at random. If you were going to talk to a church leader, you're going to find Mosley's church leader. How are we going to talk about this?
Go to somebody in the congregation.
Say again?
Congregation. Start with them. Find out who knows the pastor.
Uh-huh. And what do you say to? What do you want them to say to the pastor?
Oh, okay. I'm following you.
Yeah. So what are the words? Right. Sure. Yeah. So what are the messages? Oh, do you want me to type it?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So when we're talking to church leaders, or congregation too, what's the message that's going to work for that audience? I bet you it's different than when you're talking to most.
Exactly as spiritual. Cyclists are happier people.
Healthier
Good therapy.
Kids and families.
Great. Great. I think those all sound right to me. Other things that they're going to work with that audience. It may or may not be the same messaging. Connect to your community. Great. All right. I think you guys got it. We're going to go to the next one. Now we're talking to the mayor of Lubbock. What does the mayor care about?
Business economics.
That must be right, because everyone says it at the same time.
Employers want a healthy community.
Yep. Employers are demanding this.
Yes.
Right? It's not us. It's not like these 6 bicyclists. It's
The best employers want a healthy demand.
Great. Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. So the employers want it, the employees want it. Yep.
Something that will bring money to the community.
Tourism.
Right. This is the point. What else do the mayors care about? I mean, you got a great start. Well, okay, good.
Cam says for mayors, wellness for city employees.
Wellness for city employees. Great. Join the bicycle-friendly business program.
Yeah.
And lower your healthcare costs.
Uh-huh.
More livable city.
Yep. Livability. I'm going to start right here. Livability is maybe livable city is better than livability. Livability got a little bit stigmatized at the national level.
Maybe keep your graduates, keep your Texas Tech grads.
Yep. Great. Keep your grads. I'm from a college town, Syracuse, and that's a big one. We're all leaving.
So what college is in Syracuse?
Texas Tech. All right, good. This is good. Now we're talking to our Power Map target. So we are now talking directly to Commissioner Mosley. What does he want to hear?
He's going to want to hear that
he's everywhere.
Increased mobility.
Okay, increased mobility for who?
Everyone.
All right.
Safety.
Great.
return on investment.
Great. ROI.
Right, congestion solution.
Okay.
That was a little hard to say.
Try the
It's a little
suggestion
hard
on.
to sell, I understand.
You know,
it's
a
hard to sell.
DOT person yesterday shouted out congestion. And I said, really? And she said, if you can prove it.
Yeah.
with data.
No, if you can prove that it will remove congestion.
Well, he's got mitigation up there.
Congestion mitigation.
Yeah, it's sloppy.
That's why that was something flipped to increasing capacity.
Okay. So
Transportation capacity.
That could be the better way to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
you can fit more people on your
that's
system.
That's more feasible.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
that's a better way to go.
Great. Anything else for the community? This is our power mat target.
Yeah, I want to try one out because one argument we're developing is that, there are transportation networks that exist, and of course, TxDOT works with a number of them. Roads are the most obvious, but also railroads, also the waterways, also the general aviation network, and we're making the point, but the glaring exception is the bike ped network. And so I guess I want to kind of test that message here and see how that resonates with people if they think that someone like Mosley would be affected by that message.
We have a failed network.
It's a network that's effective when it's intact, but it actually doesn't exist yet because it's been, more than neglected. It's been cut out of the equation.
What do you guys think? Complete networks.
I mean, we all.
I think if we can work on the messaging, I think they're going to understand that everything else needs to work in networks. This is no exception.
I think the right messenger with that message to a commissioner could work. You get an engineer saying that.
What we're working towards too, like they can see what we envision.
Yeah.
And what this money will do is complete the network.
I think this is the wrong way to approach that person, but when you said that, it made me think again that we're trapped in our cars due to lack of connectivity, and that's really the issue. Now, how do you turn that, which is really what's going on, into selling that to that individual?
So the opposite of trapped in cars to me is freedom.
Options.
Options.
There we go.
So you said that might not be.
It's too harsh. It's too harsh, but it's true. We're trapped in our cars. Our suburban neighborhoods, in our whatever. 98% of the people are trapped in their cars today. They have no choices.
And there's an equity component there too. If you have to drive a car, what if you're low income person? So we could think about who is our audience there. That's going to resonate, I think. One person that I didn't put on this list, but Presley mentioned earlier in a side conversation is the media. So let's do that for a second. So I'm going to do what Preston did to me, stealing his idea. I'm the press. Why should we? You're pushing for more spending on bike ped. Why? So I wasn't going to say it. Go for it.
Yeah, a bike ped network is economically effective when it's complete.
Okay.
And provides many economic and health and social benefits. But unlike all the other transportation networks, it has been, well, I could use a kinder word. It's been neglected.
Neglected. Okay. So that's maybe a headline. Biped advocate says we've been neglected.
Or it's been neglected, not we. The network's been neglected.
Okay.
They are going to edit your statement. Be careful.
So certain media, we know we have some sympathizers, like the editor of the Houston Chronicle, who's actually, perfect for power mapping. And you get that in there, something in the paper, and then that's going to be an influencer on Mosley, because they'll write something. We need to do something about this. The people have voted 65% said they want, trails. That means they want this. Commissioner Mosley, listen, take it to Austin. And so I think the media in that sense, but on particular stories, sometimes you can get them because it's controversial and a lot of people will write in afterwards. On any kind of bike story, or if it's TV, while there's going to be a lot of bikes out, it's straight visuals. So some are looking for visuals, some are looking for conflict. So if we can tell them there's conflict in the story, they write about it, or good visuals.
Yep, they care about conflict, which can work for us or against us, but sometimes they can get those clicks. I don't know if this is maybe a little bit in the bubble of DC, but there's a Washington Post columnist who wrote a lawyer, yeah. So he talked about, don't you just want to throw a broomstick under the spokes of a bicyclist when you see him? Wow.
We read that whole thread.
Yeah. So don't read the comments.
Yeah.
But I can't read the comments. But what it did was immediately we got phone calls from other Washington Post writers who wanted to write a "Why can't we all get along? We need to cool it with this rhetoric thing." So all of a sudden, the Washington Post has, since that column was only a couple weeks ago, they had 5 articles on bicycling. That same weekend, they had run an article with one source in the entire article. Talking about how Washington State was the best state for bicycling according to the league, and then the same weekend they're writing this inflammatory column. So even within the Washington Post, that became they realized they were going to get clicks and get eyeballs from that story. So that really does work. You just got to have your message and have that right message. So what is that message? 2 minutes. Okay. So we've done media, we've done church. We've done mayors, we've done one of our power map targets. Who wants to do another one? Throw out a suggestion, one last one.
Transportation agencies, because we're going to be talking to them a lot real soon.
Great. So, including tomorrow, right? So the, maybe it's not the head of the DOT, because maybe that's more of a political message, but it's that technical person, that professional, that
Mark
career.
Williams, the Director of Planning Administration.
Okay, so we power map Mark Williams, we got to talk to him. He's the Director of Planning Division. We're getting a little bit specific here, but the idea is he's a transportation agency official. What works for him?
Protect the commission. They're going to get a whole lot of grief. You come up with a plan that gets them out of the trouble.
So this is politically wise.
Yeah, politically wise.
Mark's job is to make his boss a hero.
Yeah.
And your rules are going to make them look bad.
Make your boss hero. That really does work.
It all comes back to what's in it for me. With every person you're talking to, you got to figure out what's the bottom line for them. Politicians got to get reelected. You know, the professionals, they got to make their boss look like a hero. And the press, they got to get a story. They got to get hits. They got to get exposure. So, yeah, each message has to be twisted a little bit to what's in it for me.
And that was the big lesson of that research that we did. It's not about the bike.
Yeah.
It's about how the bike helps all of our partners.
For staff, it can really help if it's consistent with their data, their plans, and their studies.
One thing that we hear consistently with agency staff is we don't want to hear from you that the solution is to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour on the street. Like, they want to be the ones who come up with the solution because they know that they have the technical knowledge. So they want to work with you to know what the needs are and how you can build that political will to cover the decisions that they make. So
maybe instead of proposing specific rules, to say what kind of rules would you propose that allow us to make sure this money is spent, or make sure.
I mean, what should we? This person, this career person, asking them to be a resource. What do we need to hear from us? What should we be asking for? They know. They know exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work.
I just have to comment. I mean, if speed limits are actually set by how fast cars drive, and they don't use any safety data in that, how can, I mean, anyway, that infuriates me when I hear 85%.
or a better example is I need a stop sign on this block.
I get, anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're making
it too hot and too personal.
too close, man.
What is your audience? How is your audience going to hear the things that you say?
The point is let the expert be the expert, and don't try to add expert then.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But you are addressing a systematic problem that does exist.
How about the concept that transportation industry itself is at a cusp and it's going to need to change to meet the demands of the modern world? The same old stories are not going to work anymore. That we need to come up with new, or they're going to go the way of the slide rule.
Yeah.
Or become obsolete if we don't start.
Well, what you're going to start seeing is everyone is worried about where the next revenue source is going to come from. And it's not enough to appeal to one narrow part of the constituency anymore. You've got to get the bicyclists, pedestrian safety advocates on board if you're ever going to get more revenue from transportation, because we're in a modern world.
Well, they have $1 billion bond issue in November, and so it kind of depends that we may or may not be relevant in that.
No, the state.
They're getting more
The
money.
Proposition 1? Yeah, the $1.4 billion up to the voters whether they get.
Oh, that one, out of the legislature, that's right.
I know, I'm on time, and I just say about that. Pennsylvania just passed a revenue gas tax, which Congress cannot do. And they did it because they had a giant coalition, and they had the spandex bicyclists up on stage, and that changed people's minds. They realized it was just bigger than just the builders, and just the people that have been talking about this issue for years. Wow, it really is for everybody. And they also said, we got to show that the Pennsylvania legislature is more functional than Washington, D.C., Congress, and those two things together. So this thing passed.
One more thing here is that, 10 projects all over the state are going to generate a lot more press than half of a new highway interchange. If you look at that's kind
Bang
of
for buck,
a twist
press.
on the return on investment. Yeah.
Yep.
Good press in 10, 20 communities versus.
And it's our job to make it good press, not frivolous waste of it. So you got to be a credible partner there. Say we will be your biggest cheerleader when you do it. Great. I'm out of time. I'm getting the hook for the communications piece, but thank you for that. And again, just thinking about who your audience is, and also we didn't really get into who the messages are. Is it always the bicyclist in the spandex, or is it something else? It's usually something else. Okay, tactics and timelines. How do we get there? Now we know what our message is. We know what our hook, what our challenge is, what our solution is. We know who we're talking to. We know how to talk to them. Now it's time to do that campaign we've been dying to do from the beginning. So, what are the actual steps that we take now to persuade our targets to make the decision that we want? So I'll tell you a quick story. In Delaware is a small state, probably the size of one of your counties. But this is a really useful example because it helps unlock for them a lot of federal funds. So there's a guy named James Wilson who runs Bike Delaware, and he got together with the Nemours Health Services group, which is a big influential health group. They actually have a paid lobbyist, which was really helpful in this. And they got together, and they knew they wanted to start proposing some revenue, some set-asides for biking and walking. And the first thing they did was surveyed all the candidates running for state legislature. And they asked several questions, and the first question was like, do you bike? Do you ever bike? Do you like biking? Is bicycling generally a good thing? Really easy stuff to say yes to. And then the last question was, would you support set-aside out of the state budget for biking and walking, or this walkable, bikeable Delaware plan? Why did they call it walkable, bikeable Delaware, not bikeable, walkable?
There's more walkers than bikers.
More walkers than bikers. More walking voters than walking bicyclists. Voters. So, walkable, bikeable Delaware. Would you support a set-aside in the state budget? 70% of the General Assembly said they would. This knocked James's socks off. He was not expecting that. And so, armed with that survey, he and this lobbyist started thinking, okay, what are we going to do? So they wrote this legislation that would set aside, they started with $5 million. Set aside $5 million, gave it to Delaware DOT, and they would use it to match federal dollars. Right? DOT didn't get behind it. And once DOT didn't get behind it, the General Assembly support wilted for this required set aside. They went back to the drawing board and they said, would you support if the governor set aside $5 million in his budget? And DelDOT supported that. The General Assembly supported that. So it wasn't a requirement. It was an affirmation that we support the governor if he does this. The governor has spoken at the National Bike Summit. Big bike supporter. They didn't give the money to DelDOT. They gave it to the Delaware Department of Natural Resources, DNREC. Much more supportive. They said, yes, we want the money. Give it to us, and we'll match it with federal funds. The governor wrote that into his budget, made it the only issue he really got specific about in his State of the State address. So really took this issue and put it front and center, bragged about it. We're going to make a walkable, bikeable Delaware. We're going to attract businesses. We're going to be on the map. So they worked with Nemours Health Services, worked with other partners, and got $5 million that first year, got $10 million that second year in the budget. I think they got it up to 13 the third year, and then they weren't spending it fast enough. So now they're trying to get the momentum back. But they've got $33.2 million in biking and walking from this campaign, which started with that survey, led to a bunch of other tactics to build political support. Very much an inside game, working those relationships with within the DelDOT, within the governor's office, and ultimately successful. And they're matching that with federal dollars, and it became really, really much easier to get the federal dollars when you have that 20% match at the table. So that $5 million turned into $25 million because you got the 20/80 match. So that's a really quick tactic story. There's others. You want to throw out any other examples real quick? Okay, we're fine. Okay. So we're going to skip right to brainstorming. So going back to our Transportation Alternatives Program campaign, we know that they're reviewing rules right now. We know that we need the commissioners to be supportive. What should we all be doing? What are some tactics that might help us convey our message to these decision makers? This is just brainstorm. This is the fun stuff.
What are some ways that we can bring our message to these decision makers?
Yep. What tactics are we going to use to make sure that our campaign to get stopping these transfers, get the TAP money spent, is successful?
Well, of course, one of the most obvious is we need, and we're working on it this week, is to get a letter from BikeTexas on record with text of exactly what our asks are, what our concerns are, and what our ask is. Great. So perfect.
You know, make sure we're doing the official channels process, so they can't say we didn't do that part.
Yep.
In Georgia, they during this whole campaign, they were working and they got a commitment from the Georgia DOT that even though they're transferred out, they're still going to spend those dollars on these projects, but through more flexible programs. But until they got it in writing from GDOT that was the case, there's no accountability at all that when you transfer out, that's going to actually happen.
Well, Jack, you got a comment similar for that at the meeting last week, didn't you? And
Well, it's just the House answer for TxDOT of, well, this money can still be spent on bike ped.
so there wasn't not too much passion.
There was no like it's going to be spent and it's here now. It can't.
So an insider leaked to us that they were probably going to spend it on highway rest stops, but they won't say that in public because it sounds kind of bad. So they're not going to tell us necessarily, and they're keeping their options open. But this is with Georgia, it's an example of almost a win for us if they don't transfer the money back. But if we had to settle for that, if they commit to fully obligating for bike ped, that would be a kind of a win. Not perfect, but pretty good.
Another tactic we're going to use, we're going to do a list of all the projects that go in with federal money in the local area, particularly in Houston, and get letters or comments from the local people saying how great they are, particularly local politicians.
Excellent.
And to build on that list of projects that need funding, that are waiting for funding, that can inspire people to want to fund it.
So successful projects that you can actually point to, and
oh look, we got one just like that.
Yeah.
And potential projects. And I think the other thing that I think you said, Preston, is it's not just all the projects; it's projects in the jurisdiction of the people you're trying to persuade.
Those people we're going after.
Yeah. Yep.
We have legislative races in the State House coming up in November, and it would probably be a good conversation to have in some of those specific races. For instance, if they're on Transportation Committee and they're in a race right now, the Democratic opponents potentially would be friendly to our messaging and ask them to make it a campaign issue.
Or make it a campaign issue or candidate surveys again for both so that they can all try to sound better on bicycle stuff.
There we go.
70%.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
How do you show that it's a winning issue?
Public support.
Yeah. How do you demonstrate that? That's an earnest question. That's not like I have the answer.
Surveys.
Getting people to their the meetings.
Getting people meetings.
Attend the TTC meeting.
Yeah.
I guess that's another tactic of attending TTC meetings.
Right.
But your question of how do you show that it could be a winnable issue? Would it be something like in our communication to them, 60% of our members in your area vote in Republican primaries. What message would you have us give them about your position on bike ped? Like
sure.
that?
If you report a position, if you report an elected as a C3, if you report someone's position on bike ped on your issue, you got to report the other guys too. So you got to.
Right. Okay, that's good. We're a C3 and a C4, but still doesn't mean it's not a good idea. That
You probably want to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got that. You can one other one. Online. Oh, sorry.
Christy Arrington from online, she's asking, is a personal letter writing or emailing from citizens an effective way to communicate with these entities?
Anyone? The question is one citizen writing a letter an effective way to be persuasive?
Yes.
Yeah, and especially if
I heard it's a start.
One citizen and their 1,000 friends also do that.
Yeah.
But I think getting a mass amount of letter writing, emails, and phone calls, social media.
Typically on a bill in the state legislature, 10 comments are a big number. The bill that we were talking about earlier, I think over the first weekend we had close to 700 comments in one weekend. So it just, everybody sat back and said, okay, what's happening? And so it created the stir and created vision.
And we once had 1,000 people in 1 hour call the governor's office.
Yeah.
You know, and so that got their attention.
One thing that we like to talk about is something called 25-2-2-2, and that's the idea that there's 2 weeks in a year. You take out 2 weeks for holidays. You can divide that by 2. You have 25 weeks a year. You get 25 people to write 2 letters, make 2 phone calls, and attend 2 meetings throughout the year. And all of a sudden, you're in your community. They're hearing from so many different voices, diverse voices throughout the entire year. So every week they're hearing from diverse voices. So with this campaign, it's getting those 1,000 people writing out petitions is really fantastic. But even in your local community, being able to a small number can look really, really big if you have strategy behind it.
Handwritten letters. Of course, we've done campaigns where we really try to encourage people on it.
Yeah, but handwritten is going to Washington, forget it. They go through so many things in the post office thing.
Oh, really?
It takes 6 months to get to the.
And actually, what I think it means is original letters, not canned letters. So whether they're by email, it's not necessarily on paper. But
if you're talking about a local elected,
Yeah, the legislature does. We would deliver those to offices after votes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a good list. Anything else? Keeping in mind that some of these things will actually happen.
what about, are there any specific lessons from Idaho that we want to make sure that we just think about, or what they did in Europe, where they had these big die-ins, but we talked about, blood in the street, maybe that won't work. But apparently in both the Netherlands and in Denmark, those were the turning points where thousands of people got in the streets and said, stop the carnage, or something like that.
And there is precedent in the United States too. There was a great bridge campaign in Philly that had a die-in very successful.
Could you write partnerships with other organizations like Safer Streets ATX or Movability?
Yeah.
I guess with them.
Yeah, it's
it's
not just the bicycle.
Yeah,
it's bigger than that. Yeah.
When Georgia was looking to pass a complete streets policy, they really used their open streets event to they had a chief engineer for GDOT at the open streets event. Ciclavia, yeah, and they used that opportunity to have a big talk about why it's really important to pass a complete streets policy in the state. So he's hearing from all these people around him at an event that he's participating in that they really want complete streets every day, not just when the streets are closed. on some days. I know sequel days are really popular in Texas. That could be an opportunity to use that type of event.
But I don't want to lose the partnership piece. Really important to have other people speaking for you. Shows that it's kind of a different version of that 25-222. It's not just the bicyclists. It's the health people. It's the youth people. It's the beef.
It's as broad as you can get, so it's not look like it's not a focused organization, because Sierra Club and all of us would be normal partners. We need to find the unusual partners, like AAA.
Yep. Great. Again, this is something that I think BikeTexas is actually going to take on as a campaign. So these suggestions you could get the emails from BikeTexas pretty soon about these things. So anything else we should actually be considering?
I like the idea of the postcards that went to the race participants, and then I guess all they had to do was put it in the mail, sign it, and put it in the mail. I mean, I assume it had postage on it. I mean, that's
Which gives me this idea right now, because once at Hotter Than Hell, remember, Preston, we had a letter writing campaign where we got an empty booth space. Somebody left early. We opened up a booth, and we had all this paper and stuff, and everybody sat down and wrote a letter on the topic to the senator, and it helped get safe routes to school or one of these big national things. What?
I think it was enhancements. It was both the Oklahoma. Who's the guy?
Saving enhancements. Ishtook or somebody.
Because we had so many Oklahomans at the race.
Yeah. So we had a letter writing campaign when we already had 10,000 people walking by the booth.
Yeah.
And on that same line, Kent online mentioned about back to school things that are happening where you might be able to capture that audience.
That's great.
Good, yeah.
Especially pictures of kids walking on safe routes, facilities or programs.
Great. Any final thoughts, questions, concerns on the tactics piece? Does that make sense?
So I know we mentioned about speaking to the transportation commissioners and that Chinese water torture, drip, 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 every time they have a meeting, having somebody showing up and being prepared to speak. And I think that's one thing that's very likely where we can really develop people so they're not just hearing from me and Jack or Mark, but that they're hearing from a different face every time. That's somebody they may not expect. It's from the doctor. It's from the car dealer or different people like that. So I think that's something we'd want to employ, and hopefully some of the people in this conversation will help us and maybe be some of those people.
Yeah, and the one thing that you said there was prepare people. So the thing that we hear and we heard in Brownsville and Harlingen the other day was come to us with solutions, don't just complain, be informed, know what the facts are so that you can be a helpful participant and not just someone that's killing us with negativity. And so prepping those folks, prepping your spokespeople so that they're really well equipped to be your messenger is really important.
One thing that's important is one thing I actually learned real well here at BikeTexas is make sure you include a specific ask, because you can talk about what you think in a very concise way and everybody will go, yeah, they can go, thank you for sharing. But leave an ask on the table that they either have to fulfill or not fulfill. And
great. So we are really approaching 4 o'clock. And because we want to make this real, I want to ask you all, and I want to ask Robin to talk us through what some next steps might be. Remembering that everything we talked about is actually relevant right now to this TAP campaign, but not to limit your takeaways to the TAP campaign. If you're working on things in Austin, across the state, you can use these same tactics, these same strategies in thinking through whatever it is you're working on. But given that this is a very timely issue right now, Robin or Jack, if you want to give people some ideas of how they can continue to be engaged.
Yeah. After this, we want to send a survey out to everybody that participated. Basically, a questionnaire of things that to get more from you, but also to find out who might want to be involved in something specific. So, like, we're going to be looking for some member leaders where we might want to identify very specifically, 6 to 10 people that are willing to go speak to the Transportation Commission. Sometimes they move it to different cities. It's not always in Austin. Like next month, we know it'll already be in Dallas. Or that maybe we might preemptively start talking to some of the Transportation Committee members, because this could lead into legislation that would keep them from doing this again. So that we basically, ultimately, it could be a legislative solution. And we borrowed the term member leaders from San Francisco, basically a higher level of volunteer advocate that at BikeTexas we called a kind of citizen lobbyist before. That's our kind of internal term for somebody that we know is up to speed. We can say, oh yeah, go talk to the legislator in their home district. And we have confidence because we've seen them at the Texas Bike Summit called Cyclists in Suits, or we've seen them at the National Lobby Day, at the National Bike Summit, so that we already know that they're ready to go and that they're going to be on message and that they're going to reflect well on the brand. And so, we're going to be looking for member leaders, and we're going to also have a chance to get some more specific input or ideas, especially as we narrow this down to. It might be hard to be all over the state, and although there's some things we can do in every single community, there'll be some communities we may focus on more than others. Say the cities of the 5 transportation commissioners, from what I'm seeing here, are so maybe Lubbock becomes a little bit more of a target than Beaumont, because we don't have one of those people in Beaumont. But and then there's if Jack, you got anything to add? But this is the general idea. And
but I mean, if you look at all these tactics, a lot of them involve getting a lot of boots on the ground in communities. If you're talking about 25 people going writing 2 letters, 2 phone calls and 2 meetings in every community, we're going to need a lot of help with that from all of our potential member leaders throughout the state. So people to help organize the local communities, because we don't live in those communities.
And I think another thing that we need to keep in mind, one of the things that we think could help us disarm the big highway guys. There's a problem with bike projects. Let's say in 2 years, TxDOT is basically transferring out $70 million is what they're likely to be transferring out. Well, that's a lot of money. A big highway guy can do a great project with that. But if it's $2 million projects, a lot of towns get something, but those tiny projects tend not to get finished. And so that's part of TxDOT's reason for not even doing this anymore. But the other problem is a big highway company can't afford to bid on a $2 million project. And so if we get fewer, bigger projects, so we get some great pilot examples, like they did in the Netherlands, where they got one city, put all the money in, and you pick kind of a small city, medium city, large city, whichever ones they are. So we may be collectively advocating without really knowing where the money's going to end up. So we'll give them an example of a great rural example might be the Northeast Texas Trail from Paris to Texarkana. A great urban example might be Austin's protected bikeway network, or a protected bikeway network in Amarillo, or something that they can relate to that's a specific project. But really what we're talking, those are examples like picking one child to talk about the SAVER program. And so if we can realize that we pick a few things like that, or maybe we're really going to be talking about safe routes to school, when we really know it's about trails, not just about the safe routes to school.
Okay.
So it's going to be part of our stuff, and we need to work together on cyclists to know that we really mean for all of us in the long run that we can get our big projects done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
I have a question on the 25-222. Do those have to be people that are in like our decision makers district, or can we get, Texas is a big state? Can we utilize our resources, and if we're picking, can we have our Fort Worth crew be part of the letter writing campaign, or does it have to really be targeted to those specific?
That's a really great question. And typically, especially elected officials want to hear from their constituents. So it depends on the nature of who you're targeting and what you're asking for. So, if it's an election issue, if it's a vote, you really want to make sure you're targeting that person's constituents. If it's a policy issue, and that policymaker is making statewide policy, then it may be different. They may want to hear from people all over the state regardless. So it sort of depends.
And the commission is kind of in between that, because they're supposed to be up statewide, but they definitely have their allegiances from the areas that they're from. So it's a little bit of, I guess.
And they've still got to live in that community once they leave the commission. So a little bit of it is just a little bit of public pressure on them. But generally, when we send letters or we do any kind of a campaign, you only get an ask that's actually relevant for you. We would generally target it to write to your elected official, or if we're asking somebody to write at a larger level, it's because it's relevant. So we've tried to figure some of that out in advance. So somebody from Lubbock is not writing to the Amarillo mayor.
Right, right. But given that it's a statewide issue, you're going to have lots. Fort Worth is going to have opportunities to weigh in because I would suffice to say. So, yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Who's going to be at the workshop tomorrow? All right, great. I'm glad that so many of you can join us, and this is going to be really relevant. Surely some of the people who are in that power map are going to be in the room. You're going to hear a lot tomorrow about this and other federal programs. So thanks for being here to work through this campaign. And again, BikeTexas is a shining example. We go all over the country. It's definitely one of the very strongest statewide organizations who are doing this level of work. It's a very important campaign. And just want you to also know, again, you're all working at the local level for various campaigns along the way. This is a framework to think and strategize about how you are ultimately successful in the various projects that you have. So again, as long as you registered and we have your contact info, you'll be sent this presentation as well as a couple more generic resources, campaign blueprints that you can use these steps and fill it in with infrastructure campaigns or other policy or funding campaigns that you might have locally.
Can I say one thing? That tomorrow, by the way, at the thing tomorrow, this is our secret. We're not really sharing that we're going to do a campaign tomorrow. It's not really the right venue for it. So we'd rather cook it and then roll it out and then share it with our friends at TechStop. But really, tomorrow's not the day to do that until we've got it a little bit better baked.
This was a 3-hour version of a 3-day thing. Let us know how we did.
And by the way, a couple of things I want to say is we've got a little bit of Texas roots in this campaign. My predecessor at BikeTexas actually developed the first winning campaigns training, and Gail Cummins, many of y'all know her. I married her.
Oh.
And so it's pretty cool. We've been pretty engaged a long time. Of course, Preston worked there for a long time. But if you're not already a member of one of these national groups or both of them, please do so. Join BikeTexas if you're not already a member. Join your local group, whether it's Share the Road or Bell Paso or Bike Austin, local, state, national. We're all one continuum in advocacy. And as we see in this room, it's not really in silos. We're not, and think about your own strategies locally. If it's not time sensitive, then think about what's going on at the national level and the timing so that you save some of your bandwidth. What might be going on at the state level so you save your bandwidth, and we'll try to be sensitive to those things too. When there's big local issues, we'll try not to distract everybody with something at the state if we can help it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So a bigger round of applause for these folks that came all the way from Washington, D.C. And thanks to everybody that joined us online. You contributed a lot to the conversation. We greatly appreciate it.
And thanks to Christy and Jack for coordinating that. I would not have known to do that.
We're getting some comments online that they actually very much appreciated it. This was awesome, so I'm glad that worked out online.
Good.